I'll say anything inappropriate.
Yes.
Oh, wait, they're not on, or they? So people can hear what we're saying? Okay.
Okay, everybody.
Guys,
Everyone, can we? Oh, yeah, thank you. Good point. Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming. Can you hear us? Everybody, please keep the noise down. We're about to get started, please. Can you hear this? Do we have enough of a mic going? Is that better? Perfect. Slightly better. How about that? Is that any better? Oh, Bono.
Was going to say, oh, mine is much louder. Want to go with this one?
Okay, that sounds better. All right, everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started with our agenda. Before we get going, just a couple of comments, and we'll remind folks as we go through this as well. We have a lot of people in the room tonight and a lot of topics to cover, a lot of discussion that's going to be happening. I do want to open up and just say this is a difficult time for everyone in the community. It is going to impact schools, communities, families, all of us, whatever the decisions are through. I also want to remind everyone that we're not making any decisions tonight. We're going through the prioritization, we're looking at the rankings, but we're not making a decision here tonight. Also, this committee is not tasked with making a decision. We're advising to the board, which will be making the decision in February. So just as a reminder on the process, we'll be meeting and discussing tonight, again in the end of January, making a recommendation to the board in February, and then the board will be making decisions in February. So just a short reminder. I also want to remind anyone, first of all, anyone who has a microphone that will be speaking, stand up. This is for the committee members. Stand up so that we can see who's speaking. Okay, it'll be a little bit easier to have the coordination back and forth. And also we have Spanish translation available. If anyone needs Spanish translation, see Maria in the back. Somewhere, there she is. There we go. If you need Spanish translation device, please see Maria in the back. Oh, yes, restrooms are out the door if you need it, back there somewhere. To the left, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and call ourselves to order here, and we'll start with roll call.
So this evening, the roll call question that I'd like for each of you to answer is, tell us one thing you've learned about the district through these last meetings. You've received a lot of information. Most of you came in knowing things about the district, but I want you to think about something that you learned from these last meetings. One thing. All right. Sammy, I was going to say, sorry, Tammy. I'm starting from alphabetical order again. Is she here? Ah, with her. So, Tammy Afonso.
I'm Tammy Afonso and I represent CSEA 75. It's one of the youth. I thank you for everyone acknowledging that I needed to speak louder. Been all my life. I represent CSEA 75. We're your classified employees of the district. And one of the things that I've learned about this process is the district is in a really bad situation. And I never thought. Thank you, and I'm sorry you weren't able to hear. The district is in a bad situation, and unfortunately, we all are here tonight to have discussion and listen, and hopefully be respectful to one another. Thank you.
Thank you. Janelle Black. Did I see? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow, that is on. I'm Janelle and I am a parent of a student at the charter school for the arts. And I've learned how complex just the small districts and the Santa Rosa City School District, how complex the interwoven the district boundaries are and how difficult that can be to navigate.
Thank you. Allison McLeod Budlong.
Hi, so as a parent of 2 kids in the district and as an employee of Santa Rosa City Schools, I will say I have learned, I'm going to echo what Tammy said about just understanding more deeply the predicament that our district is in, our community in. And I did not know that this is really an issue that we find across California and across the nation right now. Was not aware that it was not isolated to our district.
Thank you. Allegra Ann Bushman.
Hi, I'm Allegra Ann Bushman. I had 4 children that went through Santa Rosa City Schools. I've been an educator in the district for 27 years, and this is a lot. And it's going to be hard no matter what we do. So I want you to keep that in mind. We are all going to be affected in one way or another. And going through all of the data has really shown that we need to figure things out, and that's why we're here.
Thank you. Andrea Correa.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Correa. I'm a 25-year veteran educator of Santa Rosa City Schools. I'm the current principal of Pioneer High School. I have 1 successful high school graduate and 2 current high school students in Santa Rosa City Schools. And one thing I've learned about the district through this process is that, fiscally, we are in serious trouble. And these conversations are happening because of that. And as a veteran employee of Santa Rosa City Schools, it's heartbreaking to sit down and talk about closing schools that I have personally stepped on and been at and worked at and shared space with all of the wonderful employees there. So learning about that has been difficult, but I am very hopeful that this will give us an opportunity to make real change in how we offer programs to our schools. And so that's why I continue to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian Juarez Cruz.
Buenas tardes. Lo siento, no hablo inglés, pero ahorita pueden traducirme. Mi nombre es Adrián Juárez. Tengo un hijo y una hija en la escuela de Montgomery y un hijo en la escuela French America.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrián Juarez. I have, sorry for not speaking English, but he has me translate. He has a daughter and son at Montgomery and 1 at French American.
Vemos que este distrito ha enfrentado muchos obstáculos. Primero fueron los incendios, seguido por la enfermedad de COVID. Afortunadamente, en el transcurso que estuvimos batallando con esa enfermedad de COVID, el distrito proveyó, ¿qué podemos decir? El material, computadoras, internet, el equipo necesario para mantenernos a salvo, ¿verdad? De esta enfermedad. Desafortunadamente, no a todos nos ha afectado.
As you can see, this district has went through a lot of obstacles, like the fires during COVID. When it went through COVID, the district was able to provide materials to help us.
Ahora, retomando el tema que estamos en esta noche, es algo muy serio, no solamente aquí en nuestro distrito, creo yo, en el estado de California, lo que está enfrentando y más este presupuesto, ¿verdad? Creo yo que en esta situación yo creo que todos vamos a estar afectados. En primer lugar van a ser nuestros hijos, los estudiantes de este distrito, pero me gustaría que hiciéramos de esto una unión, ¿verdad? Para que de la mejor manera podamos proveerles, como hasta ahora, los mejores programas académicos que existen en cada escuela, en las diferentes escuelas, ¿verdad? Entonces vamos a trabajar juntos, no crearnos una separación entre nosotros, ¿verdad? Sino unirnos para salir de esto y de la mejor manera proveerles la mejor educación a nuestros hijos.
Okay, so like talking about tonight, which is a serious topic that's happening throughout California. This is a situation that's affecting not just us, but our kids too. We should get together as a union to help each other. Let's work together. Let's not create a problem.
Eso va a ser todo por esta noche y esperemos que trabajemos en conjunto con el distrito que se les siga proveyendo el apoyo académico a todos los estudiantes y que no haya una sobrepoblación en las escuelas, ¿verdad? De estudiantes.
Okay, and let's hope that tonight the district can keep supporting us and not make the schools overpopulated, but getting support from the district.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Madonna Feather Cruz.
Testing. My name is Madonna Feather Cruz. I'm here representing the Native American students and also students with disabilities. I am a third generation Indian boarding school survivor and a parent of 2 children who have went from kindergarten to 12th grade in the public school system, missing only 1 day of school. And what I've learned from being on this committee is that Santa Rosa City schools are in big need of big picture schools because the students at the big picture schools that I volunteer with locally, nationally, and internationally love coming to school. They love their advisors and they love being interns in their communities and they love their Friday family dinners. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Geary.
I'm Erin Geary. I'm a teacher here at Montgomery High School, and I have a 6th grader and a 9th grader in Santa Rosa City Schools. Before teaching, I subbed all over the district, and so the main thing that I've learned is how complex it is to try to decide how to consolidate or close schools and the need that we have to come together as a community and support all of our students in whatever way we can.
Thank you. Ross Haas.
My name is Ross Hawes. I teach 6th grade at Luther Burbank Elementary School. This is my 26th year there. I've coached girls soccer at Montgomery for 27 years. And I'm homegrown. I went to Montgomery. I went to Cook Junior High School. Born and raised on the west side. Still live on the west side. What I've learned, our district's a beast. It's big. And it spends a lot of money. And there's a lot of dollars and cents here, and there's just so much to go through, so much mind-boggling money and numbers to go through. And feels like, again, 27 years I've been in this district as an adult working. This is like the hardest decision I think that I've ever seen have to be made. I was working here in the 08, 09 budget crisis and watched us carved down to the bone, which we're far away from that at this point. We're not close back to that point. Probably need to go back there. And obviously COVID was hard on everybody. but this has got a different feel and different taste, and and a lot of people in the community are so connected because half this town probably went to one of the schools that's in these binders. And your kids go there and your kids, you cheer on sports at those schools. And there's not a lot of good choices, just hard ones. So I learned that about my group that I've been working with for the last 6 meetings, that everybody here has great questions and has a lot of heart and wants to do the right thing. And no one here really wants to do anything but the best decision they can make, which there's not a lot of those to conveniently make. So I'm just hoping for the best, and I'm appreciative for everybody being here tonight, and I'm appreciative of the district people that have been putting a lot of work in. Lisa, I don't know how you do what you do in front of the board. Every time you step up there, cool as a cucumber, and being the financial captain of the ship is super stressful. So I've learned that you are calm as can be, and I appreciate your professionalism through the whole thing. So there you go.
Thank you. Kathy Hayes.
Hi, my name's Kathy Hayes. I'm also a product of Santa Rosa City Schools, Doyle Park, Proctor Terrace, Slater, Montgomery. I have 2 sons that graduated from Santa Rosa City Schools, and I work for Santa Rosa City Schools. I learned there's lots of information and there's lots of statistics, and I'm kind of a data geek. I fully admit it, but it's overwhelming, and it's hard looking at that data and then translating it into any kind of decision. I've spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what's my core values around all this data? And I keep coming back to trying to parcel out, knowing I'll be completely unsuccessful, trying to find soft landings for kiddos and trying to minimize as much damage as possible, given what the ask is. And so I have to sit and look at these data sets and hope that I'm living those values.
Thank you. Herman Hernandez. Don't hold it down.
Good evening.
Just push once and it'll go blue.
Good evening. Can you hear me now? All right. My name is Herman G. Hernandez. I am the Executive Director of Los 100 Sonoma County, a Latino Leadership Group. And I also serve on the County Board of Education. I've been serving on the school board now for 10 years. And I learned that you can DoorDash to these meetings so that you can get dinner because we are going to, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I probably shouldn't be joking. But I learned that I should have probably eaten dinner before this meeting because I didn't realize we were going to have a full house. But in all honesty, I agree with my colleague, Ms. Hayes. There is a lot of data, and this is not going to be easy. There is no easy way of going about school closures. I am an alumni of El Molino High School, and if you didn't hear, but during the pandemic, we had to go through this similar situation. I have a 10-month-old. My wife and I had our first girl, and she is living in the Santa Rosa City School District, so we have a very important stake in this whole conversation. And I really appreciate the people that are here today, as intimidating as it is, and as much as this feels like we're a fishbowl right now, because we're going to be looked at with people. We know we're being looked at through the TV, but it's different when you're in the room. But I just want to say thank you for being here tonight, and please be kind, and please share your perspective, because it is helpful, especially for the school board, to hear your opinions. And I do want to share one more appreciation to the school board members, because they're volunteering. Yes, they get a tiny stipend, but they're leading this district, and it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But I hope that out of this entire process that we can have some creative conversations and some creative opportunities for some of the school sites that exist here in Santa Rosa City Schools. So thank you.
Thank you. Ana Vallejo.
Hello? Okay, good. My name is Anna Valia Hope. Thank you for coming. I am a product of Santa Rosa City Schools. I went to Biella Elementary, then to Comstock, and then to Santa Rosa High. I have two younger kids in Biella. I have a sophomore in Piner. I have learned that this is really difficult. This is really hard. It's super overwhelming. I've learned that I do not envy the board at all, not a single bit. All of this information is so overwhelming. We're given it one day at a time, and it's a lot. I've also learned that going to some of these meetings and a lot of these, that there is a really bad, there's a lack of confidence in the community with the school board. It is 100% evident. Everybody feels like they're just learning something right now, and I'm hoping that with this, we can kind of bridge that gap, because seeing you here is it's intimidating. I'm not gonna lie, but it's important, and we have to show up, and we can't show up at the 11th hour. We have to pay attention. Those parent squares are irritating. We get them every day. We get texts, we get emails, but we need to pay attention to them. And that's partly why I got on here, is because I learned about this a year in advance, but now it's coming in heavy, and we really have to pay attention. I hate that we're here. I really do. This is difficult. And these mics are still hard to figure out. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Catherine Howell.
Hi, I'm Catherine Howell. I am a teacher in the district for the last 25 years. I'm also the president of the Santa Rosa Teachers Association. What I have learned is no school is the sum of its data. It is all more than the sum of its data. And no matter what decision is made, there are no good decisions. And communities will be destroyed no matter what decisions are made. So we're here. I have complete respect for everyone on this committee as we give our time and our energy and our passion towards this, knowing that whatever we say will break hearts and change lives. And it's a really tough place to be in. But I'm glad that I'm here. I'm glad that I'm helping with this process. And we need to make sure that students are first.
Thank you. Andrea Loveday Brown. I see. No. Yvette Minor.
Good evening. My name is Yvette Minor, and I had three students that have graduated from Santa Rosa High School, one that will be graduating in June. I have learned that we should have been doing gradual changes way before this time. I also realized that it's going to be tough and that we need to be creative moving forward in how we work this issue out so that the district can be in a better place.
Thank you. Melissa Stewart.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Stewart. First and foremost, I'm a parent of three students that have participated in Santa Rosa City Schools middle school and high schools. For the last 23 years, I've been at CHOPS Teen Club serving all the schools. And so it's particularly difficult as we've had interest and investment in all the schools in Santa Rosa. What I've learned about the district, other than the immense amount of data that comes through, is that there's an immense amount of meetings that are happening multiple times a day, every day of the week. And if you tried to participate in all of them, it's not possible. So with that respect, I think that we have a communication issue that we're trying to work on through different committees, but we need to do better.
Thank you. Carrie Taylor.
Hello, my name is Carrie Taylor. I'm a restorative specialist at Biela Elementary School. I have two grown students who have gone through Santa Rosa City Schools and loved it. Thank you for being here, by the way. And I think what I've learned is just how hard it is, no matter who we are, to consider closing schools in the district and how it will affect our students going forward, because it's going to be tough. But thank you.
Thank you. Nadia Bernice Villa.
Hello. Hi, my name is Nadia Villa. I'm a mother of 3 kids. The youngest one is right now in middle school. And what I learned here is that this is gonna be a difficult time for everybody. And unfortunately, some schools gonna have to be closed. So it's a really overwhelming, trying to advise and trying to suggest what are the measures that they have to be done. So as a parent, I'm here with you and just keep showing up for these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine Wilson.
I'm Janine Wilson. I am the principal of Abraham Lincoln for the past 8 years. I want to reiterate pretty much everything that has been said so far tonight. But the one thing for me personally is that I've learned a lot about a lot of the schools that I haven't been to as much as others. And every school is a home to many people. We all have a culture. We all have things that are dear to us. And it's not going to be easy. And it's nothing personal. It's what we need to do, what's best for everyone in this room and everybody in our district.
Thank you. Ben Wolf.
Good evening. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming out here. So my name is Ben Wolf, and I have 2 kids in the district, an 8th grader and then also a 3rd grader. And I guess aside from all the data and everything else that has been said that I've learned here through the process, I've tried to get out to as many of the campuses so far in person to meet with parent groups and groups on campus and see what their perspectives are. And I'm continuing to do that through other schools I haven't been to yet. And I just have learned of the breadth of our community, the passion in the groups of parents that are supporting kids across our entire district, which is incredible, and going to make this whole decision even tougher to have a face to everything, but it's the right direction, so.
That's it. We
Okay.
have quorum.
Then with that, let's move on to group norms. Lynette?
And so this is a time when we review the norms. The norms are to be respectful, make sure that we can use the microphones as you guys have done. Are there any questions or comments about the norms, or are there any parking lot questions that we needed to add? We have a lot of parking lot questions we're going to go through this evening. So but if there are nothing, I'm going to move on to the next portion. So we, oh.
And you didn't stand up because we have ASL and they need to know. Did you ask about the parking lot questions? One of the things I wanted to put in the parking lot, and I don't know if it belongs in this committee, is that one of the things as I'm looking at everything, I feel like it's not enough. And so, and it has to do with the finances and all that. And so also about the demographics of certain school closures in relation to closures and what that will look like for the different areas. So let's, for example, if you close Montgomery and move all the students to the other side of town, and then also for me, it has to do with some of the gang violence that we have, and we haven't taken a look at that as well.
Thank you. We'll see if we can touch upon some of that as we're going through the review and the discussion this evening. All right. So
Next, we'll move on to the meeting minute review. Everyone in the committee has a copy, should have a copy of the meeting minutes in front of them or via email. Take just a
Anybody have
minute to
anything?
review them, and if you have any comments or things that need adjusting, speak up. Any comments from the committee on the previous minutes? If not, okay, we're going to go ahead and move on through the agenda onto the main presentation section here to address the previous parking lot questions.
Okay, good evening. The board is requesting a recommendation for the following, which is 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school, and ranking of schools for board consideration. This is the task of the committee this evening based on the scenario that was adopted by the board as guidance. The actual decision may end up being something different, and that's why they are asking for ranking. Thank you. While the budget assumptions include a $12.5 million savings in school closures approximately, if we get through the ranking and the recommendation, that would leave time to have discussions about additional options and recommendations for exploration.
District mentioned there was one school that was already slated to be closed last year. They approved that. So I just want clarification. It says 3 elementary schools. Is that 3 plus 1 elementary plus 1 site that was approved a year ago? Or how does that filter into the number?
It was a total of 3 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high, and then ranking of additional schools.
But so last year there wasn't, I thought I watched the board meeting when they said last year they had talked about approving closure of a site. And then there was the talk about what we're going to do this year. So that's all part of the same number, 3 total, not 3 plus 1.
Correct.
Okay.
So the next question that was asked is, are we making decisions based on facilities or programs? And so really all of the data that was provided to you, we're looking at all of this in totality. This is not while the district is trying to fill, obviously, a budget gap, we really want to make a decision that's best for the district as a whole. And that is looking at everything and not just any one piece in isolation. So you're looking at facilities, you're looking at programs, you're looking at the finances, you're looking at all of that data that we've provided to you in order to make this determination. And so that's why all of that data that you've received is something that you have to keep in mind and think about as you're moving forward and looking at the recommendations that you're proposing to make. So have one here and then we'll come back here.
For the request to select 5 schools for closure, would they be closing at the same time? Is there a way to slow down this process, or is that part of the recommendation we'll make?
That is part of the decision and the discussion that the board is going to have to make. Really for here, what we're doing is providing them the recommendations of which school, and the board is going to have to make that decision as to how and when all of that is happening.
Are we allowed to make other recommendations to go along with the proposed school closures? So like the creative thoughts about shrinking classrooms or moving classrooms around and so forth.
So our hope is that we can make the recommendation that the board has requested, which is those 3 elementaries, middle school and high school, and we're going to rank more than that just to give them some options. And then we have assuming we have the time between this meeting and the next meeting, then the committee can start to have a little bit of those conversations about, is there some other creative solutions that you want to recommend, or do you want to recommend different grade spans that the board consider, et cetera? But those would be separate and apart from the recommendation that the board has tasked this committee with making.
Can we also make recommendations about fiscal?
The committee can put those recommendations in the report. However, really the purview of this committee is about that school consolidation and school closure. And so that's going to be our initial focus. If we have time at the end of that for the committee to have conversations about fiscal or other things, I'm certainly willing to, we can put that information in the report, and that's to be presented to the board.
I'm not sure when this part, you may have already answered this question, but so we are going to be broken up in our different circles, and we, within this group, we will rank answer those, sorry.
We'll talk about all of that. We're going to just go through the presentation to just answer the parking lot questions, and then we'll get into how we're actually going to get to the recommendations for this evening.
And then I have one other, I don't know if it's in parking lot, I didn't see it, but there was an article on Saturday morning about not closing the middle schools that I believe our chair was quoted in the newspaper about. Are we going to get an opportunity to hear that idea?
That's those additional recommendations. So we're going to make the
Okay,
recommendation that the board has requested, and then we can have those conversations.
Okay, the committee did receive information early on related to the seismic impacts. We have been having meetings at each of the impacted schools, and the slide presentations are there in English and Spanish, and we can answer questions related to that as you go through your analysis.
I think the big picture for your consideration is that with regards to, they have the information regarding the French American, which we've been talking about all of this time. The other 3 schools that are new, the district just doesn't have that data yet with regards to saying it's an automatic yes or no. And so that's just something that as you are making your recommendations this evening to take that into consideration, the fact that it is in that zone, but the district just, and it would take, several years and probably, I can't quote how much money in order to actually do the studies to make that definitive yes or no on those other school sites.
We can answer questions as we go through. You can think of an approximate about $500,000 for the trenching study, and it's a large impact to the site. If you do click through the presentations, it does show some pictures of what that looks like.
Was that cost for all of them or individual?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question about, I know we have not even begun that process of trenching. The results of the Doyle campus and the trenching, didn't that come back as like a low risk? So I'm just wondering what the spectrum of determination is to know if that was a low risk and it was a definitive, we cannot build, is there even wiggle room to bother doing the trenching to find that these campuses are salvageable?
So each campus is a little bit different, and there's just more trenching that has been done around the French American campus. So we can infer more there than at the other sites. The other sites, it would be just depending on how buildings could potentially be reconfigured. If we do trenching and turns out that there is something, it would mean, is there enough of the campus left to be able to reconstruct or change the way that the buildings are set up? It doesn't have any effect on anything happening now. It's just literally about reconstruction, rehabilitation, and construction.
Can we get clarification on the law of, my understanding was that if you're on the Alquist, Priolo, Alquist fall, state doesn't approve any new building projects. So let's say you have a building, portable the roof is falling in a Proctor Terrace. I don't know if fixing that is new, but if you were to expand, if it was a potential site, I guess it does affect how we make decisions. If the state says we will not allow you to have any new building projects, and let's say you were to close a nearby site, and then Proctor would have to house kids from a closed school site to go on campus, they would need new buildings, but you're banned from building on the campus. That seems like that really affects how this committee would make a decision. And so do we know definitively, if you're on one of those sites, what is the state saying about new construction?
It's actually, it's in the slide. And so it's on, the information is there. We would have to do the trenching to determine if we could do something on the site. That's essentially what the act means, is that for those sites, we don't know enough yet. So we would have to do trenching to be able to determine if the site would be buildable or if we could do additional work.
Time and average cost on doing that at 3 of those sites, what does that look like?
Roughly $500,000 a piece. It can be paid from bond funds. That's actually part of the facilities piece of that. And the actual time to complete it depends on a number of factors, including the depth at which the trench has to be dug, whether it can be one long one or broken up, what that has to look like, and the time of the year when that is being done. If it's when kids aren't on campus, it can be a fairly short process, depending. I mean, we're talking anywhere from a couple of weeks to several months, depending on weather conditions, soil conditions, the depth and things of that nature.
So likely not during spring break, be done and spend 1.5 million, and then we still find out we could still have to close, we couldn't do any projects. Okay.
So we have looked at not only the district's public schools, but we've also been looking at the charter schools in all of this. And we established at a prior meeting that the charter schools were also on the table with regards to closure. And you'll see as we start going through the review later that what we've done is combined the charter schools with the elementary schools, since they are elementary grades. And so that's how we're going to be working with those charter schools, as well as we have the conversations at this meeting and the next meeting. Okay.
And I do believe that I had selected one thing that should be corrected, which is the accelerated is actually issued, the grade level is primary. It's actually authorized by the secondary district. So that's just a point of clarification that I had a question about, but it serves primary, so 4th and 5th.
I'm wondering about the Kids Street renewal date, because didn't that just get renewed a couple months ago? So hopefully for less than a year. Yeah. Kids Street charter.
I forget that I have to speak into the mic. It's a 5-year renewal. So that just happened.
Apologize if I missed this. I gotta stand every time.
Yes, we have interpreters who need us to be able to.
Okay. I'm sorry if I missed this, but I was under the understanding that Cesar Chavez Language Academy lost their primary charter moving forward. They were not approved through right for the K through 6. Is that not?
It would not, so their charter expires in 2026. So they are there through that time. That's their next renewal. So that at that time, we would have to determine where that school is going to be located, or we would have to ask Wright District to authorize us to continue to operate there.
I think the part I'm concerned is I thought we just did ask them and they said there was a negative understanding that they weren't going to renew. Am I confused?
There has not been any official request that I am aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, that charter school is authorized by Santa Rosa, not by right. It's in rights boundaries, but it is no, the charter is approved and authorized by the district. It's the location that's an issue. They are in rights boundaries. And so to continue at that location, they would have to get rights approval to continue at that facility. The school itself is authorized by Santa Rosa.
Jeanette, so I'll stand up. I see Kid Street Charter in here and it says it's in the Santa Rosa City District, but we haven't really talked about it before.
Well, it's in the boundaries of Santa Rosa, but it's not authorized by Santa
It
Rosa.
says under enrolling district, it says Santa Rosa City. Is that not correct? Is it under something, should there be another district? Kid Street Charter.
Kid Street Charter is an independent charter that is authorized by Santa Rosa City Schools. That is not one that they have a separate board, so that is not one that we can consider for closure.
Got it. Thanks.
Is Lewis Adult, how does that filter into all of these? Lewis Adult, our site, the Lewis site? And if it does filter in, if that was a site to be, again, I like to use the word sites because sometimes it's not like a school op lives on a site, but it's the site. Like for instance, the Doyle Park site has the French charter and the Doyle Park site has the earthquake issue, not necessarily the French folks.
Right.
And how much does Lewis cost if in savings? Did I miss that if we were to?
So Lewis is where we house our special education preschool. And so that is not a program that we could close. It is a program that would likely need to be relocated, but that would be a programmatic decision by the board after all of the closures and consolidations are considered.
There's got to be a cost though to have that site maintained. Is there like a bare minimum cost if, and if it lays a ban, I mean, this is not for this committee to decide what to do and build housing or something on that site, but obviously if you close that site, it's got to have some sort of monetary value. If we're looking for other little cracks in the dam to not close other sites.
So again, we have to continue to operate that. As far as where that will be located, that will be up to the board after the school consolidation and closure committee decisions are made.
Just a point of information. When I'm saying the renewal dates on here, none of the site closures can't accelerate a renewal date, correct? So the Santa Rosa City School is obligated and approved a charter that runs through those dates regardless of if the site were to close.
No, that is not correct because they are for our dependent charters. So for the 4 charters that the school district authorizes that are dependent, so CCLA, SRFAX, Charter for the Arts, and Accelerated, that would be a board decision. So yes, they are authorized, the petition through those dates. The board could opt to close those if that's where that went.
Oh, it kicked you off? Sorry, we're trying to reshare the screen on Zoom so that everybody at home can also see what we're looking at. All right. So the next question that we had received was all the data really equal when we make our recommendations? And that's something for all of you to have that conversation and decide. You could decide, at one group or one table that one or two data points you believe are more important or way higher in your determinations, and someone else could decide that a completely different one and for a different reason is. And so that's really for you. We've provided the data just all on an equal basis. And as you're making your decisions and recommendations, you look at how and what is a higher priority, lower priority, and weigh those accordingly. So the way it's been presented to you, it's all on even footing, but that is part of what you guys will be talking about and considering as you move forward. So the question is, are there opportunities for some sites to earn revenue in the future if closed? And there is the potential of that. But again, what this committee is looking at really is the closure of the schools. And we're looking at it based on what's best with regards for the district, especially on the educational program side and for those students. And it really is another committee. If the board were to decide to deem these school sites surplus, another committee goes through that process, makes that recommendation to the board, and that committee would potentially be looking at what the revenues that could be earned from those school sites are. But that's really outside of the purview of this committee. That is another committee. If the board were to sell or lease property, that would have to take that into consideration. I know it doesn't make it any easier.
Okay, but if you want to save a high school, and I know I can get $2 million of leasing a site and I can save a high school, I want to know that. It's frustrating because, I mean, I love my district. We've put a bunch of carts before the horse over a handful of years. And I just feel like to have another committee that's 3 committees away from all this interconnectedness. We are interconnected with the fiscal committee. We are interconnected with the imaginary committee that might happen down the road. But if you're between 2 sites that none of them want to be closed, nobody in here wants their site closed, and you're between this one that can generate money and this one can't do anything. But if you at least don't sell it, but can lease it and bring some money in and save a high school that nobody wants to close, that's definitely worth considering and knowing. And I just feel like if there's information out there that says we can generate cash, or we know that a site is dead, I mean, because of the earthquake thing, you all sign it for your houses. You say, oh, I live on an earthquake. I still want this house. We can maybe sell it and again, make money. If we can't build a single new construction on it, then why keep it? And if that keeps a high school open or that keeps a middle school open, we are irresponsible and not considering that. That's just my opinion.
I can understand your frustration and where you're coming from. But honestly, this is not information that the district has at this time. And it is law. It's in the education code that if a district is to lease or sell a property, it has to go through a surplus property process. It would have to put that out for, bids or request for proposal to see what kind of revenue could be generated, et cetera. And so that's not information that the district has at this time because there has been no decision to close any given school. So I completely get where you're coming from, but this is the reality that we're in at this point.
It sounds like you're familiar with the law around it. So I wanted to ask, is there ever a possibility for a school site to scrunch to part of their location, but then lease out another part of the location temporarily? Because we all know population goes in waves. Is that something that happens?
Yeah, school districts can lease portions of their campuses. That happens.
So is it possible for us to get that kind of information, like an estimated cost of rental for every site? Is that something that we could look at? Because that would make it will help us in our decision.
There's no way to know who might want to rent the sites. So, if private school would want to rent it, they'd be willing to pay X. If some other public charter school rented it, they'd be willing to pay Y. Without knowing and putting out the school sites for an actual bid or RFP, you don't know who might be willing and what they might be willing to pay.
So it wouldn't, the cost wouldn't necessarily come from the district. It would be based on who would want to rent the property, is what you're saying?
That's part of it, yeah.
It feels like a good time to bring up, just looking at criteria 22 and the fact that we haven't identified any alternative use, whether it's revenue potential or otherwise, is also just a question that's come up for me very strongly in looking at potentially closing a site and not knowing if it's going to have life after that's of value to the community. So I just want to echo that desire for more information. If it's not like, what's the sale price of this property, but what are potential interests? I know we've heard one, I think, was mentioned around the Comstock campus, but that was really it. So I don't know if that information exists, not for sale, but just any potential alternate use.
They haven't been, which is why for that criteria, when we start looking at that, the answer was no, because there hasn't been, except for, you always hear, I don't know in this community, but you hear in communities all the time, oh, so-and-so would love that site if it was available. But the district has not had any, that I am aware of, concrete, asks or, hey, if this is ever closed, we'd want to use it for this, which is why that criteria showed that they were all no, because there wasn't anything at this time.
So we have provided the average cost for us. It does adjust each year based on the percentage of use and the number of routes. There are varying information, but for general education, right now it's roughly $134,000 per bus route. And we do have the transportation slides, number 48 to 52. But with all of the different combinations, it's not something that we could just say, oh, for this one, we'd have to add so many sites. Depends on what those boundaries look like, what combination of schools there are. And especially at the elementary school, there's over 90 combinations, possible combinations. So it's not something that has been run directly.
So that 134 is per bus route. So how much do we currently have?
Sorry, we do have partners here from West County to help us answer some of these questions this evening. So for Zoom and for everybody to be able to hear, it's per education, general education route is 134,000, and we currently have 17 routes for general education. I'm not clicking back and forth. Oh, those. Okay.
So is there a different cost for special ed? And what is the cost for that and how many routes?
So for special ed, it is driven by IEP, and that is done on a percentage of use. So it's not necessarily a per route. Yeah, and then with the, I know there were questions that came up related to the safe routes to school when our team reached out and was looking at what they have versus what we have. We actually have done more analysis than the way that they list the walking distances. So the information that was provided in that slide deck previously actually has about the best information that we can get, which is actual walkability, making sure that kids aren't crossing over, say, Highway 12 or something like that. Okay. The schools that would be located within our elementary boundaries, where we could potentially have a TK through 8 model, are Comstock, Santa Rosa Middle. Thinking space-wise, also Luther Burbank, potentially Santa Rosa Charter for the Arts. They're obviously already operating in that respect. So those are just the ones that are easiest. And as you look through your data tonight, there were questions about feeder patterns. So obviously with the multiple districts feeding in, this is where it's set to go.
I see a couple of the committee members that are taking notes. You have the presentation sitting at your seat, so. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question on the last slide. So pretending that we're treating the charter schools as elementary schools on the criteria
Yeah.
rank page. So I'm just speaking out loud and I want to make sure I understand this. If we were to pretend the or CCLAs on the Lawrence Cook Middle School campus. So if we know that CCLA can be moved as a program. So if we said we were going to close Lawrence Cook Middle School, but we could move CCLA to one of those schools that's TK through 8, that would be an option that we can make a recommendation for?
So
Or is that decision made by the school board?
So ultimately, it's made by the school board. However, the school board really is interested in getting to the options that may be recommended. To get to that, we have to go through the rankings because that is the official legal charge of the committee. But the school board is very interested in hearing options if we can get to the recommendations. So absolutely.
And then, for example, to use the Doyle campus, since it's on the earthquake fault and we know we can't build on there or do anything with that, if we decided to move the program to one of the schools that you close, can the French charter stay at that campus until it phases out its students so that and then starts with its new student population at the other school? Like pretend you close Santa Rosa Middle, so the TK students for the French charter school start at TK Middle. I don't know if this is possible. I'm just.
So we can talk about that when we're looking at other options. With your initial question, we want to though focus right now. The first focus is which schools to close, not thinking about, oh, let's pick up this program, put that one there, pick up that program. That's the other options that we can get to. Our first part is which schools to close, and then we can start having those discussions. Okay.
I just, on the feeder pattern slide, Bennett Valley schools are not listed, and Montgomery gets a lot of students from Bennett Valley.
Thank you sorry for the oversight. Thank you. Okay, for the public, please, because we need to have any comments received on the mics for the people on Zoom, and it makes it very difficult for the translators. And yes, Rincon Valley is actually on that pattern. Those are the main feeder patterns. So there's splits everywhere. It would make this slide huge.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Herman G., to clarify, Cook Middle School was closed a number of years ago and does not exist. So closing CCLA is closing that site. There's no moving CCLA and having Cook magically reappear. I just wanted to make that clear, that we can't just move CCLA and close Cook, because Cook doesn't exist anymore.
So I want to piggyback on Aaron and Catherine. First, was there a total number of students who feed into a school or a site that identified what the feeder school was? Because I think there are multiple feeder schools missing from all the high school feeders. Because we have so many small districts in our community that I can name 4 other schools that feed into Piner. I can name 2 other that feed into Elsie that are not on this list. So I'm wondering, was there a threshold that had to be met for the number of students who fed into the school for it to be counted? Number one. Go ahead.
So let me look at, I'm sorry, as far as off the top of my head, I don't. This is about the district, not the individual schools. So the districts are what we're looking at, where those feed into, and it's their main feeder pattern. That doesn't mean that there aren't schools within that district that feed to others. This is just a rough idea of where the schools feed to.
But I think ultimately the concern that I would have is that it doesn't paint a true picture of what's coming into our schools. Because when you're an outlier school, like a Maria Creo or a Piner or Elsie or Montgomery, you're pulling from all these smaller districts that aren't accounted here. And that I think is giving us not a clear picture.
There's not a clear,
Yeah.
not a very clear way to provide that information.
And then my second question was back to the CCLA. So I understand how I asked the question incorrectly. I understand the CCLA's charter comes from Santa Rosa City Schools, but the permission to stay at Cook's campus comes from the Wright district. And so are we to understand that CCLA must move by next year, or they have an additional year there?
Their charter renews, I believe it expires June 30 of 26. So we would have to make a determination before that time. So there's a petition renewal process that happens during that year of renewal.
But for planning purposes on this committee, should that be something that we say, okay, look, CCLA is most likely going to have to move. Let's take that into consideration while we're making recommendations to be closing schools.
You could certainly take that into consideration. There's no guarantee that Wright would grant that, and that is something that we need to plan for, is the inevitability of needing to move that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what the proper terminology is, but to the principal's point, Roseland, it has to renew their school district. And I know Mr. Haas has mentioned the negative 600 student population for the interdistrict transfer from Elsie Allen, but we know that the Roseland School District takes the majority of Elsie Allen students at their high school. So it's like, if we're considering what the principal just mentioned, we don't even have the data of Roseland, but we do know that the Santa Rosa City Schools has the authority to recharter that high school, which they're losing a significant amount of high school students. So I'd be very worried about considering what the although it's well, I think it makes sense. I also think there's other charters that the district has control over that they have to renew too. So I would be concerned about weighing in on or kind of considering what you just mentioned. Because there's a lot of unknowns. It's not just that charter school.
And ultimately, that will be a board decision as far as any renewals or not.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just in following up a comment that Andrea made, I know at least Piner and Elsie Allen do receive substantial students from CCLA. And if you are including Slater, Comstock, and Santa Rosa Middle or Comstock on the feeder line, it may be very appropriate to put CCLA, especially in those, for those two high schools.
Yeah, we did not, I don't believe that we called out charters specifically because those can take enrollment from anywhere. They don't have to be within the boundaries.
And to Herman's point is that, so some of these charters, we have a reciprocal relationship. So, Spring Lake, whatever, is in our Slater district. So, but we've got, some of our charter districts we have leverage with, and others we don't. And Rams, Roseland, zero leverage. Technically, both of their schools are if it's in the city of Santa Rosa, they'd have to send them to Ursuline's campus because we control all of the secondary and high school campuses. And there is no secret, Elsie's been dying for at 20 years because RUP has been stealing all the kids. Everybody knows it. So it's like, that's frustrating is that my heart breaks for Elsie when a charter has been killing that school for 20 years.
Okay, and I was asked to make an announcement that the Zoom is being broadcast in another room here on site if anybody wanted to go join and have a place to sit and come back. Room 80. Okay, Principal Santos will direct you if you choose that you would like to be more comfortable.
So I have a clarifying question about CCLA. So is it possible to move CCLA into our district where we don't have to get approval from the right district?
So that would be up to our board, but yes, that is an option. Okay, the boundary maps were included in slide deck, the first presentation, slides 23, 40, and 48. So you will have access to those. And then I know there have been a lot of questions about the financial impact with intra and inter-districts and what would that look like? Because we don't know what the impact will be depending on which sites are closed and what migration is decided. What we can share is that there is a hold harmless, essentially, provision for the comprehensive schools, traditional schools, not for charters, but for regular schools there are, where we are funded on either on the current, whatever the highest amount is of ADA, so average daily attendance based off of enrollment, which is the current year, the prior year, or the average over the last 3 years. So there is a soft landing that happens when you see fluctuation in that enrollment. So just to let you know that it wouldn't be, if we did see a large drop in enrollment, we would have a year to make some type of adjustment in there. And then there were questions about school-based programs and enrollment and success. And I just wanted to point out that success may be measured in different ways for different programs and or student populations. So there are a few slides in here that do have the number of students, the number of sorry, is that? So you have some students who are participating in multiple programs or multiple AP classes, things as we go through those programs. Yes.
My question is just where this data was, where do we get this data? And then secondly, and it could be anybody around here at this table, if we see errors in the data, what's the best way to communicate that information rather than nitpicking here right now?
So our information and evaluation team pulled this from Aries. And in collaboration with our Ed Services Department. So if there is a notification, if you notice an error, you can send it to me and I can forward it to the right. Thank you. Okay, there was a question about increasing enrollment at sites and the CEQA requirements. And so here's the actual code related to that. So all of our sites currently have extra capacity, but we do have if we were to increase by more than 25% of that capacity, then we would have to go through a CEQA process. Okay, and there's information that was requested, but it's technically outside of the scope of the committee, but we still wanted to make sure that we provided it to you. And for one thing, how will reimagining or creation of programs help with the $25 million budget issue? That's really tackled in LCAP and fiscal stabilization. But another thing would be if we can get through meeting the legal, requirements of the committee to come up with recommendations of different options to explore. And then we've had the special education supporting data folder. So there's information there that details a lot of that, the definitions or the differences between ed code and how we locally define something.
So before we go through the analysis after the public comments, I wanted to just remind everyone, because you're going to be looking through the data that you have either in your binders or you have the computers in front of you so you can look at that data. And so we just wanted to remind you where the data was and everything that we've looked at from the time we've been having the meetings, just so it'll be a little fresher in your mind and you know where to look for that information. Did you have a question before we start that?
I have a question about one of the criteria, just briefly. For criteria 9, most historical investments, it looks as if schools, it's held as a negative for schools when there's historical investment, and I was hoping you could clarify that again.
Would you mind if I did that when we start talking about the prioritization and analysis portion of it?
I would
that
not
okay?
mind.
Okay, thank you. All right, so can you hit the... So just wanted to walk through, the first meeting we had was August 9th. That was an organizational meeting, really looking at what the committee was going to be doing, what the charge of the committee. We explained how the criteria was going to work and the scoring. And as far as data with that time, we provided an overview for each school site that included their location, their grade span, enrollment, their capacity, and also included the boundary maps by grade span. And so that information is there from that first meeting for you to refer back to. The second meeting, we focused on demographics, and these were 6 criteria that we looked at and discussed for that portion of it. And so again, we'll go through having those conversations, but the first, these really were looking at what the enrollment was at the various school sites, what it looked like projected moving forward, and looking at what the capacity was. And in both of those cases, we were looking at it with inter-district transfer, with inter and intra-district transfers and without. And so that's where you can find that information. And then the data that was provided at that meeting included historical, current, actual enrollment from that date that we had the meeting, plus the projected enrollment moving forward. It also looked at the inter-district transfers to provide that information. We looked at the demographic makeup by grade span, so the ethnicity, free and reduced price meal eligibility, and the unduplicated pupil percentage. We had the boundary maps again, and then the facility capacity. So all of that information was as part of the information you have in your binder for meeting number 2. Meeting number 3 focused on the facilities. So we were really looking at the condition, the various costs for modernization, et cetera. And you know what? I will go ahead and answer your question now since I'm looking at it. So we're looking at 3 really different aspects when you're looking at the facilities and the costs. We wanted to know what are the facilities costs moving forward, with the notion that if you have a school site that has $10 million worth of need and one that has $100 million worth of need, maybe you want to consider putting the $100 million worth of need higher on the list for closure, just because it's going to take more investment in order to do that upkeep or that work moving forward. Criteria 8 looked at the modernization or constructions that was recently completed. The notion there being if you just spent $10 million on a school site, that might be something you want to take into consideration versus something that there was no money recently spent on that school site. And then the historic is really looking back over time or in the more distant past. And the reason it looks like it's a negative, the thought process here is if you have a school, the example I gave just now of 10 million versus 100 million. If you have a school that has $100 million worth of necessary upgrades or needs, but you look back and the district hasn't spent a dime on that school, this notion of making sure that you are not negatively taking that piece into consideration. So, yep, it needs $100 million, but there's been nothing spent on it versus this other school needs 10 million, but the district has spent, 30 million over the last several years. And so it's trying to take all three of those pieces when you're looking at in totality, what is being spent at a school site. Does that make sense? Okay. We can talk about it more when we get to all right. So the data provided at that meeting, the next slide. We looked at the indicators of quality scores. So these were based on the district's facilities master plan and the needs at the various school sites. We looked at those historical investments and recently completed projects. The planned investments broken out by the different bonds that the two school districts technically have passed, and as well as the charter schools. We talked about whether any of the school sites had unique facilities, if there were environmental concerns. We were talking before about Alcos Priola zones. We looked at the facilities inspection tool scores that's provided by the Office of Public School Construction, that metric to look at, and also looking at the site plans and any leases that the district might have on any of the school sites to take that into consideration as you were looking at closures. Meeting number 4 was focused on educational and student support services. And so again, this notion of we're not just looking at money, we're not just looking at facilities, we also want to take into consideration the programs and whether there were any programs at any given school site that if you were to close that school, that is a program that the district would lose and could not be replicated. And so those two criteria looked at that. We provided teacher ratios, we provided program and course offering informations and other alternative education programs and information that was available from the student support services. Last meeting was fiscal and other impacts. And so we were looking at a couple of things. Most of the things that we were looking at really were those other impacts. We wanted to make sure that there were, if there were any safety concerns right now at the school sites with students, teachers, staff, et cetera, coming and going from those schools. And if there would be any impacts once you closed a school and the remaining schools received other students, would that then cause any type of safety or traffic impacts? And so we provided that information. And we also looked at proximity to other school sites. Actually, you can get the next slide. We looked at proximity to other districts or non-district schools that were potentially, if you were to close the school site, might they be more likely to grab district students? We looked at the transportation, so bus ridership, percentage of students that are walking or being dropped off, and also because the district doesn't keep track of how many kids are actually walking to school, what they provided was the percentage of students within that were living within walking distance that were resident students to give you an idea of how many could potentially walk to school because they were attending their neighborhood schools. And then we did look at costs. The cost of operating the school sites, including their, all of the information with regards to their budgets. So it had staff and non-staffing costs, and then provided a per student amount for the operating costs, excluding staff, because staff really is a program decision that the district makes, and we wanted to know what the potential savings would be just from that school site, not considering staff, as well as what the potential savings would be in total with staff and closing that facility as we were moving forward.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but for criterion 22, the alternate use, it says that there are none for all the schools on this chart, and you said that we didn't take the time to really identify that, or that we wouldn't be identifying that because, can you clarify? Can you just clarify?
So
please?
that alternative schools was looking at, had the district already identified any alternative uses? So had the district already thought, oh, if this school campus were closed, that would be a great place for a preschool program, or that they knew that the city or someone else had already requested it. So this was looking at right now, have there been any requests or thoughts for other uses? What we were talking about earlier was if you were to close the school site, what could it be used for in the future? And yeah, that information we just don't have because that would require with regards to outside uses, putting out that request, et cetera, to do that information.
So for that criteria on this chart, the answer is no for every single school.
Correct, because there have not been any identified uses. The district hasn't made any decisions or considerations about using that site for anything else at this time.
Can I ask why it's included on the chart if it hasn't been done?
This was one of the, remember, we decided and agreed on the criteria before we had the data. We were trying to make sure we were being objective, and this is what we're going to be looking at, agnostic of what the information was. And so it was after going through that process and getting the data that we realized, oh, there really aren't any additional uses. And so in that respect, it's one of those that you could probably go, okay, I don't have to think about that one anymore. But it's included because we decided on the criteria before we had any information to actually plug in.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't we? We did that one. I think that's the end of that one. Okay. So we are going to, unless there are any other questions on this portion of it, we are going to first go through public comment, and then after that, we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in order to look at recommendations for tonight and potentially for the next meeting as well. But we'll go through the public comments first, okay?
Okay, everyone, we're going to get set up for public comment here. We're going to have a couple of mics up towards the front. The way this is going to work out is I'm going to call out, try and call 3 names at a time in order that folks will come up. We do have close to 60 people that want to provide public comment tonight. So we've limited the time to 1 minute per person, just to clarify. So it'll be 1 minute per person for public comment, and we will be holding folks to that time so that we can get to the discussion point that the committee needs to get to following that. And everyone, yes, please, can I remind everyone to please be quiet during public comments so that we can hear the comments and so that we're able to translate those as well. And folks on Zoom are able to hear as well. So please keep any conversations to 0 within the room. If you need to have a conversation, please go outside the room to have those back conversations. Okay, so we.
I stopped sharing. Yeah. You're going to put the timer up, Simona? Yeah.
So the first 3 can start coming up. So Dirk Shermer will be first, followed by Adam. And I'm going to go ahead and apologize preemptively to everyone for messing up your names, but I'm going to do as best I can. So first person, Dirk Shermer, please come up, followed by Adam Trice, followed by Ellie Grogan.
Thank you for hearing us. I'm here to speak to a citywide solution to the closure issue that distributes a little bit of pain to everyone rather than imposing the entire burden of the solution solely upon one part of our community. First, I would ask that we create a plan to close all middle schools and relocate those students to the high schools that can accommodate them for the 25-26 year. This quickly signals the community that none of the 5 high schools will be closed and confer an air of stability and fairness. This would preserve all of our valuable programs and the ADA money from the families that are currently making plans to leave the district. Any single closure would disrupt families, peer groups that are critical to student and parenting success. Additionally, district offices must be on the table, none of which is in your current budgetary calculations. We must freeze the construction of the new district office vanity building. Ultimately, if we do not resolve this issue within our community, the worsening fiscal condition will lead to a foreseeable state takeover with draconian solutions. As an entire community.
Thank you, Dirk. Sorry, the 1 minute timer is up. And thank you also for being the first one to get cut off by the 1 minute timer. It's going to happen often tonight, I think. So next up is Adam Trice, followed by Ellie Grogan, followed by Brett Ainsworth.
Hi. Okay, the committee is focusing on seismic safety as a reason for closures. The district's facilities committee and experts confirm Proctor Terrace is seismically safe and does not need any retrofitting. It's withstood multiple earthquakes without sustaining any damage. This includes 2 in 1969 that were centered in Santa Rosa, where students from Fremont Elementary, where the Charter for the Arts School is now, needed to be bused into Proctor Terrace due to their own building collapsing. If earthquake safety was a concern and criteria for closure for Proctor Terrace, it no longer should be. In 2018, they dug a trench and found no fault, and they built mobile restrooms. If you guys end up selling the property, the money does not go back to the general funds for all of these schools. It just doesn't. We're here and we should be enriching our kids' education, not taking it away from them. The reason we're here today is to advocate for my kid, for all of our kids. Let's keep Proctor Terrace open.
Thank you, and sorry,
continue to
that's
build.
the end of the 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have Ellie Grogan, followed by Brett Ainsworth, followed by Marion Staroba.
My name is Ellie Grogan, and I'm the PTA president for Proctor Terrace Elementary. Attorney General Rob Bonta's letter on racial equity through school consolidation talks about the importance of decreasing segregation through this process. And Proctor Terrace ranks #1 for diversity. We're very proud of this, and we want to welcome more students into our community. Our neighborhood school is in an accessible central location. It's bikeable, it's walkable, and many of the families who attend are also there because they've lost their neighborhood schools due to the conversion of charters, namely the arts and French school. So the central location of Proctor is really important to us. And lastly, on the earthquake topic, I did want to reiterate that the trench was dug in 2018 and they did not find a fault line. So we hope you consider nuance as you are looking at earthquake as one of the criteria in your decision making. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Brett Ainsworth, followed by Marion Staroba, and then will be Christina Trice.
Hello, committee members. Thank you for your time. My name is Brett Ainsworth, and I have previous experience with school closures as chair of the ACLU in Chico. Although equity concerns should be your first priority in making any determinations, and the equity impact report should have been run and should take precedence, as well as federal laws regarding protected categories and ADA. I'm here to argue that the combined criteria of academic performance and low socioeconomic status, API and SES, should be your dual second consideration. This means that schools with a low SES and higher API should not be considered for closure and consolidation before schools with low SES and low API or high SES. Why? Because the cultural sensitivity, community support, and effective school culture are already working at the higher API schools due to the equity you already know you can't run roughshod over low SES schools. Make the logical decision and consolidate to Luther Burbank, where I work.
Thank you. That's the end of the 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, next up is Marion Staroba, followed by Christina Trice and Kimberly Pyle.
My name is Marion Staroba, and I'm a sophomore at Marie Carrillo. Tonight, I'm here to ask you not to close any of the 5 high schools in Santa Rosa. Right now, the students at these schools are the same kids who lost homes in the 2017 fires and who spent 2020 working remotely through screens. These teenagers have gone through countless negative transitions in their lives. Instead of closing one high school, please consider closing all the junior highs. This poses 2 very different solutions: K-8 elementary schools or 7 through 12 secondary schools. Both options have the common goal of reducing the transitions that children undergo during their primary education. Multiple studies dating back to 1987 showed the transitions are detrimental for students, and at every transition, academic achievements decrease, while bullying, suspension, and expulsion rates increase. We already have many K-8 schools in Santa Rosa, including Cesar Chavez, the Charter School for the Arts, and St. Eugene's. Also, at Calistoga High School, they follow a 7 through 12 program, which is similar to schools throughout Australia, where students are proven to be happier.
Thank you, Marion. Okay, next up is Christina Trice, followed by Kimberly Pyle, and then Robin S.
The district cites a $20 million deficit, blaming factors like the end of COVID relief funds, inflation, and changes in the state's funding policy. But here's the issue. The committee isn't considering attendance. which directly impacts the funding schools receive. More students attending means more funding. Why isn't this a factor? Proctor Terrace is ranked number 1 for diversity and number 2 for academic performance in the district. We chose that school because of attendance or not academic performance. And make sure you give us options when you force us out of these schools, because we won't fall in line with wherever you tell us to go. We want to choose where we go. So make sure we have that option, because my son will succeed and we will leave the district if we have to.
Thank you. Next up is Kimberly Pyle, followed by Robin S., followed by Regina Rowland.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Pyle. I'm here to talk about Proctor Terrace. Woo woo. My son attended Proctor Terrace almost 10 years ago. We loved how it was a neighborhood school, still is a neighborhood school. We loved how he and his friends would ride or scooter over to school, and they would also scooter home. My son's in college now, but he and his buddies, they still get together. They're lifelong Proctor friends. They call themselves the Proctor Crew. My daughter currently is at Proctor Terrace right now. She's 8. She's in the special education program. It's an RSP math program. And in fact, Proctor has the longest lasting SDC elementary program in the district. And Proctor Terrace Special Education and RSP have been around over 30 years. And they're one of the few schools that have their own SDC class. So that's kind of cool. We're asking that the committee please consider pushing to keep Proctor Terrace open.
Thank you. That's the end of the minute. Thank you. Next up is Robin S., followed by Regina Rowland, followed by Nancy Lance.
Hi, my name is Robin. Thank you for your time today. There's a lot of talk tonight about the data, taking a look at the data and the criteria. But on November 18th, the committee voted to cherry pick some of that data, specifically academic performance and attendance. So I find it really hard to see how the committee is going to effectively and legitimately rank schools for closure if they're cherry picking data and not looking at academic performance and attendance, which are pretty much what schools are about. Go to school, learn, perform. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Regina Rowland, followed by Nancy Lance, followed by Karen Sanders.
I strongly support the model proposed by Chair Ben Wolf, proposing that more middle schools are closed and their students then transferred to high school campuses that have the capacity. I agree that if a single high school is closed, it could have major effects on student health and disrupt their academic four-year plans and limit college accessibility and so much more. If we must close any high schools though, and I know people aren't going to be happy about this, the pre-1978 builds really do require so much more licensing, and there's just so many hazardous remedies that they have to do to repair those buildings. Anything that's more than 6 by 6 feet, the EPA needs to get involved, and it just costs so much more money. So yeah, anyway,
Thank you. Next up is Nancy Lance, followed by Karen Sanders, followed by Jessica Lickow.
My name is Nancy Lance, and I'm generally loud enough. I don't need a microphone, but here goes. On the subject of diversity district,
No, you can't do it. You can't do it well.
Which one do you want me to use?
No.
This one? There we go. Okay, so on the subject of diversity, this district oftentimes looks at 2 categories, Hispanic and non-Hispanic. There are many schools in this many schools in this district and students in this district that classify as other. And I think you really need to look at that when you're looking at diversity of student population. Secondly, I think there's a bias, and I think there's a perceived bias in this community that this district supports certain schools more than others. And those would be the schools in the Southwest Santa Rosa area. They have the schools, they are the ones that have the highest percentage of students to transfer out and the lowest performing statistics. And there is a perception on this among the parents that there are members of the board that support that school more than any, and that that school is technically off the table, legally or not legally, but that's the perception. And 3, data shows that children that move from lower performing schools to higher performing schools then go on to do better in school than those that move from higher performing schools to lower performing schools. So I ask that you think about this for all of the children in our community, and I don't relish your job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Karen Sanders, followed by Jessica Lickow, followed by Sarah Jenkins.
This committee received criteria 1416 from paid consultants specializing in school closures. The decision to arbitrarily eliminate them is outside of the committee's authority because Attorney General Bonta's memo states studies show that schools chosen for closure are sometimes not the lowest performing schools, but that students only benefit from school closures if they are reassigned to higher performing schools. To improve equitable educational opportunities and abide by the legal mandate to alleviate segregation, all districts should proactively plan for displaced students to access higher quality educational opportunities. Priority access should be thoughtfully designed to give students a realistic chance of enrolling in known, high quality, and college preparatory schools. Eliminating criteria 14 through 16 is in clear defiance of the direction given by Attorney General Bonta.
Thank you. Next up is Jessica Lickow, followed by Sarah Jenkins, followed by Laura Feliciano.
Can I go? Hi, my name is Jessica Lee Howe. I am president of the PTO that funds the deficit for Santa Rosa Charter School for the Arts. I'm also treasurer of ArtQuest, the nonprofit that funds ArtQuest. I've had a foreign exchange student graduate from Montgomery. My oldest graduated from Montgomery. I have a student at Santa Rosa High in ArtQuest and a student at Santa Rosa Charter for the Arts. I think the community has created a solution for you. We close middle schools. We move to a TK through 8 model because we know that works. It addresses all the problems that the community as a whole keeps bombarding the district board with. It's creating healthier children, smaller class sizes, addressing the mental health crisis, reducing the pack mentality that your middle schools are currently undergoing right now with the violence and the outbursts and the all the issues that the middle schools have. Let's go backwards, make it simpler. Go back to TK through 8.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Jenkins, followed by Laura Feliciano, followed by Luciano.
Hello. As my final public comment before swearing on Wednesday, I want to thank all of you on this committee and those facilitating the work being done here. Thank you so much. I, alongside many here, see the absolute need to spare the students currently enrolled in high schools at any site. Resiliency aside, the lasting impact of one more trauma of this magnitude on this specific group of developing minds is not something we should be rolling the dice with. I request that doable options other than the 311 that does not include the closing of a high school are discussed and presented to the board. I also request to families to think about why you want your child at a certain school in the future and in the present. What are the most important factors to you? And let people know. And if it's not your neighborhood school, why not? Regardless of what happens in the coming months, the improved cultures and programs need to encompass the desires of the families in our community to strengthen what we have. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Laura Feliciano on behalf of Genevieve Lilligren, followed by Curabosa Lucinovo. I apologize again on that name, followed by Corky Kramer.
Hi, my name is Lori Felciano, and I'm a teacher at Slater. I've been there for 18 years, and I'm reading this on behalf of Genevieve Lilligren, who has been teaching for 20 years. So as a 20-year veteran middle school teacher, I'd like to help y'all play this tape all the way through. Middle schoolers require access to science labs, art classrooms, restrooms, locker rooms, and more. To think that they could be sequestered in one area of a high school is a logistical impossibility. It is simply not the way our high schools are built. Additionally, how would sports teams at the middle school and high school level share facilities? It is a logistical impossibility. Some middle schoolers come in at 4 feet tall and 11 years old. Placing these children on a high school campus with seniors who can be 18 and 19 years old would be terrifying for them. Please again remember, it is a logistical impossibility to sequester them on a high school campus. Middle schoolers lack higher level thinking skills as governed by the frontal lobe, which is just beginning to develop at this time. This leads to impulse behavior.
Thank you. Thank you for your. Next up is Cordoza, followed by Corky Kramer, followed by Robin Swint.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Luciano. Solamente quiero que piensen en nuestros jóvenes estudiantes, porque ellos son el futuro de mañana. Pues gracias a todos aquí por asistir y es todo. Gracias.
So his name is Luciano. He just wants you guys to think about, his name is Luciano. He wants you guys to think about the future of the students, and he thanks everyone for being here. And that's it.
Thank you. Next up is Corky Kramer, followed by Robin Swint, followed by Nicole Coppola.
Thank you. Name correction. I'm Christina Kramer, not Courtney Kramer. Courtney Kramer is my daughter who graduated from Montgomery High School. I live in Southwest Santa Rosa. I have a daughter who graduated from Montgomery, and I have a son who is a sophomore in Montgomery. We chose this school. We chose this path. I implore you that you do not close any high schools. I understand that you have to make a recommendation. This board gave you the task of making a recommendation to close at least one high school. And I think that you need to get the board back together for special meetings or whatever it may take for them to change and amend the direction that they have given to this committee. And thank you for your time for this committee. This is a no-win solution for everybody in this room. But please do not close high schools. They've gone through enough. They've gone through COVID. They've gone through disasters. And high school is the most instrumental time for their social, academic, athletic, and future goals. If you change a high school for any of these kids or close a high school for any of these kids, it changes their trajectory forever.
Thank you. Next up is Robin Swint, followed by Nicole Coppola, followed by Christina Kramer.
I'm just yielding my time to Dirk Shermer.
Thank you. I think she liked rec.
Sorry, we don't yield time, so we can't add extra comment on there. So do you want to use your public comment time?
Fairness matters a lot. At the Santa Rosa High School and Maria High School communities don't seem to be represented on this committee, and it's creating an image of unfairness. The original matrix was an objective set of criteria developed by the state for all districts. To the extent that the committee is cherry picking criteria leads to the impression of stacking the deck without representation from all of our community. As an entire community, we value our kids. That's why we're all here. And we have the talent and the empathy to be better than this and to do what's best for them. Thanks so much for your efforts.
Thank you. Next up is Nicole Coppola, followed by Christina Kramer, followed by Angel Ortega.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Coppola. I am the vice president of the Charter School for the Arts, PTO. I have a third grader and I have an eighth grader. And I want to say that when we looked for our school, because we are not in this district, right? We used to live in this west side. Now we're in the southeast. We looked for a school up to 8th grade. I wanted my child to avoid middle school. My husband wanted our child to avoid middle school. It was traumatic for us. And it was so exciting that there was a K through 8. There's a reason private schools go K through 8. You don't see private middle schools. You see fancy schmancy private schools going K through 8 because it works. I don't want any school to close. Obviously, we don't. But the reality is high school is too important to close a high school, and elementary school is where these kids figure out, their purpose, the communities come together. We love our K through 8 school at Charter School for the Arts. It is so special that my 8th grader gets to go to school with her 3rd grade little sister.
Thank you, Nicole. Next up is Christina Kramer, followed by Angel Ortega, followed by Olivia Auerberg. Yes, sorry. Olivia, we'll get there. Christina Kramer. Oh, okay. In that case, Angel Ortega, followed by Olivia Alberighi Specker. Thank you. Followed by Jim Levely.
Hello, my name is Angel Ortega. I'm a proud alum, staff, and coach of and for LC Allen. I wanted to address the committee and the importance of LC Allen High School and its community. LC Allen serves a huge portion of South Santa Rosa as it is the only SRCS high school south of Highway 12. With its enrichment programs like the University Center, which I benefited from, LC Allen has resources for its students that make attending college and pursuing higher education more accessible. LC Allen also has the Santa Rosa Health Center Clinic, which serves students from all over the SRCS district. Closing LC would be an immense disservice to a community already systemically overlooked. LC Allen is a pillar of Southwest Santa Rosa that must remain open. Shout out LC Allen and all my students that live in Santa Rosa Avenue, Sebastopol Road, Corby, Moreland, and Roseland. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Olivia, followed by Jim Lavelli, followed by Amy Bolton.
I'm saddened to hear that Hidden Valley Elementary School may be closing. I graduated from Hidden Valley Elementary, where I attended from preschool through 6th grade in the deaf and hard of hearing program. I am now a staff member at that school. Hidden Valley has a long history of building community between staff and deaf and hard of hearing students. Breaking up the school would scatter these students and staff to other sites, reducing the number of people who are fluent in sign language and comfortable interacting with these students. We are building community by providing tools like American Sign Language to hearing students during the day and also to parents of deaf and hard of hearing students at night. Hidden Valley Elementary School is more than just a bunch of buildings. It is a community that has been working together for years and years and has provided a place of well-being and support to many children and adults. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jim Lavelli, followed by Amy Bolton, followed by Allison Smith.
And a strong finish are the most important keys to success. I support a solution that keeps every district high school open by consolidating middle school with elementary or high school, depending on what suits each school best. Done correctly, older students can be role models for younger students. Middle schoolers can have opportunities and a head start on high school and facilitating social and academic growth. The disruption of having high schools close is not fair to our kids' mental health. As everyone has said, our kids have suffered too much these past several years. We need to keep these high schools open. Let's find a way to support all Santa Rosa students and families by keeping high schools open. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Amy Bolton, followed by Allison Smith, followed by Jamie Russell.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amy Bolton. I came up through Santa Rosa City Schools, graduated from Montgomery, and now my kids are going through the same system. Thank you all. This is a very difficult committee that you're on. I hope you guys are considering the future enrollments. Santa Rosa is in the midst of an unprecedented building boom with respect to attached to multifamily apartments. And that's going to be a lot of new families coming, a lot of new developer fees. And I just hope that is part of the equation in looking at your future finances.
Thank you, Amy. Next up is Allison Smith, followed by Jamie Russell, followed by Erica Lepanovich.
Hi there, I'm Allison Smith, and I'm here tonight. While I could give stats about the high quality of my child's school, but I know at this time it's not valuable because your role is to consider the data. So tonight I'm speaking to the only closure model that's been presented to the public thus far, 311. Through my emailing with the board, speaking with Ben Wolf, and going to the board meetings, they've mentioned they're open to alternative ideas. We believe the committee tonight can be more creative in their approach and give the community alternatives to closing multiple schools, particularly elementary schools. While we understand some may need to close, we'd like the committee to spend some time focusing on the areas where elementary schools are more concentrated, specifically those within a 1-mile radius of each other. In addition, please consider elementary schools with larger available space as a way to accommodate those displaced students, with the goal of distributing elementary schools more evenly and equitably throughout the district, with focusing on retaining our existing students and maybe even attracting students from feeder districts instead of the fear of losing our students to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Next up is Jamie Russell, followed by Erica Lepanovich, followed by Corey Jellison.
Resiliency. We've heard that said a few times today, and at every level, there is resiliency. Our high school students, though, do not need to be tested anymore on this. They have had disasters, they have had COVID, they have had their own personal trials, and this isn't the time. We planned for 9, 10, 11, or 12 years for our children to go to their high school. We've branded them. We've got them Letterman jackets. We've done all of these things because we want our kids to love where they go. And we're all here today rooting for our campus, but we need to root for our high school kids. They don't need any more. We're setting them up for not success. So this isn't the time to tear them apart from their goals, their academics, their sports, their intentions to go to college or to find a workplace that they are passionate about. We will be cutting them off. I object to any data being cut from consideration. That skews data. It's a bias at many layers, and I please, please, please ask you to not.
Jamie. Next up is Erica Lepanovich, followed by Corey Jellison, followed by Lucas Shaw.
Hi, everyone. Geography matters, and we need to keep it in mind because we want to keep kids in our district as much as possible. Hidden Valley, Burbank, Monroe, Lincoln, they all buffer our district from all the other districts around us. They want our students. They will take our students, and we will continue this death spiral. So please, you need to keep the schools in the periphery intact. Now, the east side is really complicated. Yes, there's fault lines, but you cannot just close the whole east side. Doesn't make sense. It's not possible. There's over 1,000 students in the east side. Where would they go? And if you say Rankin Valley, Mark West, Bennett Valley, death spiral. Can't be done. Okay, so what do? Use the best information we have. French charter, lots of info. Campus is no good. Everyone assumes it, knows it. Brook Hill, very close to French charter. Very high assumption that's the case. They could go to Luther Burbank or Proctor. Proctor, they've trenched. We think it's good. Leave it there. Hidden Valley, most capacity and less likely to be affected by the fault due to the earthquake zone. Look at the yellow picture. That's it.
Thank you, Erica. Next up is Corey Jellison, followed by Lucas Shaw, followed by Madeline Smith.
Hello, my wife and I both are graduates of Santa Rosa City Schools. We have 3 kids in the district, but more importantly, my career, my background is restructuring advisor to public companies, specifically mergers and consolidations of distressed businesses. Couple quick pieces of unsolicited advice for the committee. There are 342 possible consolidation scenarios for you to consider. 34 are viable, right? You are drowning in data, mostly bad and misleading data. You're missing the point. You cannot close schools unless you can provide these families a viable solution, right? It doesn't matter what the data says. If there's no place to send the students, you can't close the schools. Everyone here is on the right track. Middle schools have to get consolidated in a creative way. That's 100% right. And Hidden Valley, Monroe, Luther Burbank, it is mathematically impossible to close those schools and keep our students. The model, I'm going to leave it here for all of you if you care.
Thank you, Corey. Just a quick side comment here. Folks that are kind of hiding behind the TV monitors and all, there's room in the back. If we could maybe shuffle around there, just kind of come out from, yeah, we're having some signal issues and cables getting bumped behind the TVs there. So if we, or at least give the TVs some space there so they don't get bumped there. Okay, next up is Lucas Shaw, followed by Madeline Smith, followed by Shiyu Wang.
I good? Okay. Hi, my name is Lucas Shaw. I'm a senior at Santa Rosa High School, and I'm here to make a case for why the district should reconsider not closing high schools. All elementary schools within the district go up to sixth grade. Middle schools include 2 years, and I believe that these 2 years are much more flexible for change. High school would have closing a high school would have substantial emotional, social, and academic impacts on freshmen and juniors specifically, as well as just the entirety of all the students. But focusing on freshmen, there many changes are happening in our physical and emotional health, and when you're entering a new environment like that, asking them to leave and enter another one is ridiculous. It's going back to, and it's reestablishing a shy attitude, low self-esteem, and uncertainty amongst freshmen and all of the students, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Next up is Madeline Smith, followed by Shiyu Wang, followed by Laura Fry.
Hi, my name is Maddie and I'm a senior at Maria Carrillo, and I'm here to argue against closing any high schools and really considering other solutions because of the impact on student mental health. Already, current high school students have experienced a lot of struggles throughout their education, losing weeks every year because of wildfires, losing years because of COVID. Students have already dealt with a ton of setbacks to not only their academic education, but our social, emotional awareness and maturity. Closing a high school means stalling development even further. Forcing students into a new environment in the middle of their high school experience is going to cause increased stress, worsen mental health, which impacts academic performance, self-esteem, relationships, among many other things. Any idea that students are going to be able to keep up with their academic performance and not face any mental health struggles is a completely naive fallacy. With how much stress young people are already under, subjecting them to another stunting experience is going to escalate issues. Mental health needs to be prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Shiyu Wang, followed by Laura Fry, followed by Tanya Hoffman.
Dear committee, please be creative, propose not to close any high schools, as that will make significant impact to students' academic outcomes and college preparation. Their curricular will be interrupted and may not be continued. Their hard work on GPAs may be impacted by new setups. Their mental stability will be disturbed. So please do not create the turbulence at this critical learning period. Also, it's even worse if we close Maria Carrillo High School, because so many families live in this city because of its academic excellence and overall education quality. Closing it will cause many students leaving the school district, many professionals leaving the city. So school district will lose funding, city's professional ecosystem will be damaged, and the economy heavily impacted. Everyone, including families from other schools, lose in that scenario. So please do not close high schools.
Thank you, Shay. Next up is Laura Fry, followed by Tanya Hoffman, followed by Jennifer Jimenez.
Hi, my name is Laura Fry. I have 2 daughters at Creo, and I'm here to add to this beautifully strong chorus of voices asking you to keep our high schools open and instead close our middle schools for all the reasons that have been so eloquently stated tonight. The risks to their mental health, their academic and professional well-being going forward are too high for our high schoolers. If when you make your recommendations that you must close a high school, I'm asking you to please honor the current 9th through 11th graders and perhaps take a phased out approach that starts with the incoming freshman class. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next up is Tanya Hoffman, followed by Jennifer Jimenez, followed by Mitchell Johnson.
Good evening, Tanya Hoffman. I'm a parent, community member, physician. Thank you to the advisory committee for all your efforts you put in. I cannot imagine the burdens and the stressors you've taken on regarding this process. I thank you for your service. And I know, and I'm certain after hearing you guys tonight, that you have the best intentions for the success and wellness of students, teachers, and schools. And I hold that intention with this because clearly we're all here for the same reasons. I want to speak to the criteria that was removed, absenteeism. The one thing I want to say about that is that considering that debt is the main reason for these closures, removing a criterion that serves as an important funding source for the district is flawed. And that's just important to me, and I may be worthy of kind of considering that. I also want to mention Master Facilities Plan, page 23, that was approved in December. This past December, there's a protected state funding source for earthquake risk. And this is important for the seismic fault line schools. It's the seismic mitigation program is a
Thank you,
subset of the
Tanya.
facility hardship.
Next up is Jennifer Jimenez, followed by Mitchell Johnson, followed by Carla Wickner.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Jimenez. I have been a teacher for 21 years in this county. I have 2 children who have gone through Santa Rosa City Schools, one graduate who's in her second year of college and a junior at Maria Carrillo High School. I just want to reiterate what everyone has already said, or many have already said, that high schools should remain open. All high schools should remain open. If it is not the purview of this committee to address alternate solutions that will allow for this, then I believe the committee needs to go back to the district and the board and demand that it is your purview, because this is a consolidation committee. It is not a closure committee. So yes, closure might be on the table, but consolidation means pursuing educational opportunities that are best for all students. I also have always taught in 7 through 12 models, and they do work. They work in Roseland, where I currently teach. They work in Calistoga, where I've taught previously. You can do it. This district can look at alternate solutions and do what's best for students.
Thank you. Next up is Mitchell Johnson, followed by Carla Wickner, followed by Ann West.
My name is Mitchell Johnson. I currently teach at Santa Rosa High School after 2 years in Montgomery and a short time at Carrillo. This summer, the Friday before school resumed, I was informed that I was being transferred from Monty to Santa Rosa due to declining enrollment. I think I've had a preview of the disruption that many of us in SRCS will experience due to declining enrollment. I would like to encourage the committee and ultimately the board to consider retaining as much enrollment as possible, a very important part of this decision. We're ultimately here because of financial issues, and avoiding exacerbating those issues has to be a huge part of this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Carla Wickner, followed by Ann West, followed by Peter Rowinski.
Hello, my name is Alexa Forster, and Carla Viking asked me to make her comment for her. She wanted to talk about why she chose to send her children here, which is the same reason I chose to send my son here, which is the awesome IB program at Montgomery and the walkability for our neighborhood. In addition, when my son was a freshman, in addition to having suffered the wildfires and the COVID closures, they had the additional trauma of a death on campus and public publicity about the horrid state of the facilities. And my son told me he was embarrassed to come here. And I asked him if he wanted to leave. And we made a decision as a family to stay and fight and invest in this community. And it breaks my heart to think that the school would close out from under him before his senior year. I don't support closing any high schools for the reasons everybody has articulated, but it would be particularly heartbreaking for the students of Montgomery. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ann West, followed by, sorry.
On both of them, they left. They had to go.
Okay, next up is Ann West, followed by Luz Hernandez, followed by Robin Fuentes.
Hello, I'm Ann West. I've been in this district for about 25 years, and I teach at Luther Burbank Elementary School, a gem of an elementary school. I love it. Our families love it. Our students love it, and they come back from college and visit their teachers they had in elementary school. We have a beautiful community, and it would be lovely if we could have 7th and 8th graders at our campus. We would love to hold on to our students. And we would love to stay open, and we have space, and we're in the arts district, and we would truly love for you to come and visit us and find out why we're such a wonderful gem of a school. Please don't close any high schools. Let our middle school kids stay with us at the elementary. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Luz Hernandez, followed by Robin Fuentes, followed by Sotha Av.
I stand before you to express why closing down high schools is not the way to go. It's so crazy that at a solid age of 26, I still have to hear the negative connotation given towards Southwest Santa Rosa. As a proud LC alum, I can attest that we are not what others perceive. I am a college advisor, LCs to be exact. We are not how we are perceived. We are a community where students get together to sing their principal for his birthday every year. I come from a single parent household. I'm the oldest, and I cannot express how much of a positive impact LC Allen had on me, and I don't say this enough, but I was a TED Talk speaker this year. LC students are not what we are perceived. Growing up, hearing negative comments about the school I attended, the staff guided me to believe in myself. I was pushed hard enough to get a full ride to UC Davis. My classmates attended Princeton University, Harvard, UC Berkeley, SLO, and more, but that's not talked about enough. I stand before you to please consider a different route, but do not close any high schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Next up is Robin Fuentes, followed by Sotha Av, followed by Katie Barr.
Hello, my name is Sotha Am. I attended Luther Burbank Elementary School, Lawrence Cook Middle School, as well as LC Allen High School. I believe that we should make Luther Burbank a K through 8. And secondly, I believe that we should not close LC Allen High School. LC Allen High School is a continuation of Miss LC Allen herself. It represents strength. It represents perseverance and overcoming the odds. Many of our students are underrepresented as well as underserved. Though it may not seem like we don't have a very diverse community, we are a community filled with a lot of, I would say, shared experiences. We come from immigrant families, we come from undocumented families, we come from families that had to work for what we have. So deeming LC Allen as a bad school, it does not accurately portray our school and our students. There's a lot of success and.
Thank you, Sotha. Sorry, just to clarify, did we miss Robin Fuentes? Maybe not present, okay. And next up then is Katie Barr, followed by Greg Peterson, followed by Meg Peterson.
Hi, my name is Katie Barr. I have 2 daughters at the School for the Arts, which is a TK through 8. It works. With all of the horrible, crazy things that are going on in the world today, I think it's clear that we should be celebrating the arts, empathy, personal expression, inclusivity, and all of the other beautiful tenets that our school community stands for. There have been countless studies that prove that children who are exposed to arts education programs are given a leg up academically and emotionally. If you refer to criterion 10, you'll see that our school has special utilities that would be difficult to move or replicate at any other campuses. We boast a black box theater, dance studio, music room, and science dedicated classrooms. I'm very hopeful that the committee and ultimately the board will see the value that our school brings to this district and will continue to allow us to foster the future artists and creatives of tomorrow. Go Narwhals. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is Greg Peterson, followed by Meg Peterson, followed by Kate Bisbee.
Hi, my name is Greg Peterson. I grew up in Santa Rosa, went through Slater and Montgomery High School. And I believe that 7 through 12 model offers significant benefits for our students by creating a seamless educational experience during critical developmental years. Bringing middle school and high school students, together on some campuses fosters stronger connections between grade levels, enhancing mentorship, opportunities, and a sense of community. It also allows for better alignment of academic programs, enabling advanced 7th and 8th graders to access high school level courses while providing high school students with leadership opportunities and support for younger peers. Additionally, consolidating resources means more access to specialized staff, extracurricular activities, and facilities, enriching the overall student experience. By adopting this model, we can create a more cohesive, supportive, and resourceful environment for all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Meg Peterson, followed by Kate Bisbee, followed by David Chen.
You've been tasked with coming up with a 3-1-1 model for school consolidations. While I hope that you come up with multiple solutions with that model, I implore you to think creatively. We want to do what we can to keep kids in our schools showing up every day. While a TK through 8 model is the most desirable model, I urge you to think about how this would work with our feeder districts. While it means less transitions for our elementary school kids, it doesn't have the same effect on the feeder districts. Where is the equity in asking students from the 9 feeder districts to move from one elementary school to another? Or do we risk additional middle school charters popping up in those districts and then lowering our already dwindling enrollment? This is where a 7 through 12 high school and middle combo allows access to accelerated learning opportunities and equitably throughout our city. All of the high schools except Carrillo can accommodate the middle school students from their feeder schools. So maybe keep Rincon Valley open as a feeder to Carrillo, or use bond money to build another building that can accommodate.
Thank you. Next up is Kate Bisbee, followed by David Chen, followed by Meg Peterson. We'll skip that one. Sorry, followed by Annie Lee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Bisbee, and I'm a senior at Carrillo. I would like to talk to you tonight about love. Since my very first day as a high school student, what I've gotten from my school community is love. From the second I stepped on campus, Mrs. Margaret Brady Long, sitting right in the back there, welcomed me into her class and showed me what it was like to love to learn and what it was like to love to teach. My coach, Greg Fogg, who was at the last board meeting last Wednesday, gave me a team, a family full of love even before I started my freshman year. But this love isn't just limited to Carrillo. I see familiar faces all around this room and at the last meeting. The Rosa cross country team, including Ome, a representative on the board, inspire our team to support each other and spread love to teams everywhere around this community. I work with multiple Monty students in a nonprofit that strives on student love. Our high schools are connected by love, and one that brings us all here tonight to save them. So we ask you to consider not closing a high school at all. Whether it's closing middle schools, leasing a site, or thinking of more alternatives, we are here to help you help us. So please listen to our ideas.
Thank you, Kate. Next up is David Chen, followed by Annie Lee, followed by Andrea Selvia.
Good evening, President, Chairman Wolf, and the member of this committee. My name is David Chen. I am a member of the City of Santa Rosa Community Advisory Board, President of Skyhawk United, representing over 600 homes in Santa Rosa. I'm also a board member of the North Bay Asian American and Pacific Islander Coalition. And most recently, I am an organizer of the Better Santa Rosa to promote creative solutions so that we do not close any single high schools. Committee members, we are where we are now today because of the board mistakes. Do not repeat it again. Thank you,
David. Next up is Annie Lee, followed by Andrea Selvia, followed by Damien's Cordero.
Hi. Okay. Do you hear it? Okay, my name's Annie, and I'm a junior at Maria Carrillo High School. And I just wanted to say why it'd be really, really sad if Carrillo got shut down. I was talking with my friends at lunch today, and we were talking about these closures. And it seems like that if Carrillo was shut down, all of us would be going to different schools, most of which are outside of the district. So if you close down Carrillo, a lot of these kids are not going to stay in the district, which seems like kind of a big part of, you know, the closures. We also have a lot of kids going to four-year colleges, and I'm personally am a junior, so I'd be really affected by this. If you close down Carrillo, it just makes it really hard for you to establish new relationships that you've been building for a long time, especially after COVID, since my grade specifically didn't really have middle school years because we were all remote. So people going to college really need this last year to, apply good. Okay, cool.
Thank you. Next up is Andrea Sevilla, followed up by Damian Cordero, followed by Amy Eng.
Sorry. Okay. Good evening. I'm Andrea Sevilla, a proud parent of 3 children at Steele Lane Elementary, 1 in first grade and 2 in kindergarten. I want to express my strong support for our school and advocate for its commitment or for its continued operation. Steele Lane is a vital part of our community, serving as a hub for families to connect and engage through events like family nights and cultural celebrations. It fosters parental involvement and strengthens our community bonds. My family has greatly benefited from these opportunities, forming friendships and collaborating with educators. Additionally, the school embraces diversity and inclusivity, enriching the educational experience for all. It teaches children essential values like empathy and respect, which is crucial for their development. This is why I urge you to help keep our campus open. In closing, I thank the dedicated teachers, staff, and administrators for their unwavering commitment to our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Damon Scudero, followed by Amy Eng, followed by Deborah Tapia de Martin.
Hi, my name is Damaris Cordero. I'm a parent of multilingual students. My children attend Maria Carrillo and Rincon Valley Middle School, area where the multilingual population has been growing. I believe that many of us here are unaware of the challenge and barriers that these students face within the schools. I want to remind you that these students have the same dreams as each of you children. This school closure will negatively affect not only academically, but emotionally our students and our families. Many of the multilingual students are now in school's classroom without receiving the support they need and placing themselves as long-term English learners, or perhaps as many without the opportunity to graduate. Closing schools where there are high number of students who are receiving support or special programs will negatively affect the students. Thank you to the staffs and teachers who have treated our students with respect and
Thank you. Next up is Amy Eng, followed by Deborah, followed by Norman Hauk.
Hi, my name is Amy Ng. As an educator for 20 years, I recognize the impossible situation we are in, but I know the long-term effects that a closure of a high school will have on these teenagers. They have been through too much already with fires, COVID, and Zoom. As a mom of a Montgomery junior, I come to you to please ask that we do not close a high school. My son is a proud Viking and is on the varsity basketball team here at Montgomery. Unfortunately, I haven't heard anything about sports being a factor or a data point. My son has worked diligently to someday play college basketball. To start over during his senior year with a new team and a new coach is unthinkable. This is true for all athletes. The closure of a high school will have a huge impact on these athletes, potentially impacting their future college sports. Additionally, my son is on the IB track and is taking many of these advanced classes that are only offered here at Montgomery. We need to work to be more creative and avoid.
Thank you. Next up is Deborah Tapia de Martin, followed by Norman Hauk, followed by Kaylin Wen.
Good evening. I wanted to just share the history of grade configurations in the States. At the beginning, it was K through 8, and then there was a huge movement because there was overcrowding of the system K through 8, and that's how junior highs came up and middle schools came up. But since overcrowding is not a problem, I think that now we can go back. And now in the 2000s, there's a huge reform movement to schools K through 8. And I personally wanted to advocate for that. And I was wondering if these new configurations are going to have some sort of report, a fiscal report, so we can see what that savings will look like, and if it's something that you guys are going to have. Because I think you have heard many different configurations, but you don't have that monetary value or the savings that we'll achieve with that. And also, I believe that you guys don't have all the information on the sites that are in the trench.
Thank you, Deborah. Next up is Norman Hauk, followed by Kaylin Wen, followed by Bruce Marinez. Thank you.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Norman Hauk. I am a proud parent of a precocious Proctor Terrace tiger, so I'm biased. On behalf of her mother, I would like to encourage the committee to consider additional data, specifically for the future students that are entering the system, entering the district, and also to look at the TK students in particular. As part of that. But if the data is cumbersome, I urge you to think about the high school students in particular. My daughter's in TK. I'm privileged. We can adapt. We can adjust. But for those high school students, I think it's really important to keep their schools open. And if your elementary school is closed and Proctor Terrace remains open, I welcome you to our culture. I don't know about the academics. My daughter's in TK. But I like the culture.
Thank you, Norman. Next up is Kaylin Wen, followed by Bruce Marinas, followed by Ashley Bell.
I'm Kaylin, and I'm a current junior at Carrillo. So regardless of the reputation Carrillo currently has, Carrillo is a safe and diverse and academically strong school with a bunch of high-performing programs. However, what we do best is build a community. I've spent the last 3 years surrounded by amazing staff who put their heart into everything they do for us, which you don't get to see often. Most importantly, we all care about each other. We all show up and support at games and performances. The school has so much talent to offer that I hope you can see. Teachers always prioritize students over their own well-being, and I ask you to consider listening to your community, especially during a time like this, and keep all 5 high schools in session and prioritize what's best for students. Having a normal high school experience shouldn't be a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Bruce Marinez, followed by Ashley Bell, followed by Christina Miller.
My kids went to SRCS High School and had a wonderful experience. They're now in a high school at Maria Carrillo High School. I ask that you keep all high schools open. It has been said, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Look around you, look at all the women here. You think for 1 minute they would let this stand of you closing a high school? As a man and as a parent of 2 high schoolers, I too will would approve not closing any of the high schools. Please consider keeping all the high schools open.
Next up is Ashley Bell, followed by Christina Miller, followed by Sarah Drillick.
Wow. My name is Ashley Bell. I'm a teacher at Santa Rosa High School, and my child goes to Proctor Terrace. Go Tigers. I am coming here to say I watched the first interim report that was presented to the board, and the board was very clear that they were not approving a 311. They were very clear that they were approving a dollar amount, and that was the discussion that took place between the DO and the board. So this narrative that it has to be a 311, I think is not true, at least when I was watching on Zoom from my home. But beyond that, Santa Rosa High School, the 9th oldest high school in the state. We just celebrated our 150th anniversary. Very proud to work there. I've been there almost a decade. I don't love the criteria, none of us do, but I think if we are going to consider closing schools, we have to think long-term about where students are going to go. If your school's not bringing kids in, if your school is bleeding kids out, then you run a risk of continuing that school going forward. Are we going to close a school that is drawing kids in to keep a school open that can't keep half of them there?
Thank you. Next up is Christina Miller, followed by Sarah Drillick, followed by Jessica Mullen.
Hi, my name is Christina Miller, and I have 3 school-age children. I have an elementary school, middle school, and a high schooler. This is a huge decision. I've tried my best to pore over all the criteria provided by School Services of California. I've found inconsistencies and outdated data that make it feel like the deck is stacked against some schools. I understand that you have a complicated and difficult recommendation to make, but I ask that you base your recommendation on unbiased and factual data. At the very least, please share a way for the community to ask questions about this data, the criteria that was provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Drillick, followed by Jessica Mullen, followed by Alexander Yoon.
Hello, Santa Rosa City Schools. When you look at data, I would really like you to think about the fact that we are not San Jose. In fact, I haven't heard any data about all of the children who lost their homes in 2017, 2019, and 2020, and how you're tracking children who lost their homes in Coffey Park, in Skyhawk, in the Reebly area off Calistoga Road, and in Fountain Grove. I've read every single study they have about children who lose their homes in disaster like these. And no matter what, the presiding message is they have the highest risk for negative outcome. And I want to know that you're thinking about those kids, and I want to see the data. If anybody wants to know about the Public Records Act request that I made, they have 4 more days without an extension. If you want that information when I get it, I will stand outside that door.
Thank you, Sarah. That's your minute. Thank you. Next up is Jessica Mullen, followed by Alexander Yoon, followed by Claudia Galindo.
So many great alternatives to closure and so little time. I urge this committee to tell the board that the committee can't recommend any closures until alternatives to closure are evaluated on equal footing. You have the power as a committee to demand that. Staff and the Sacramento consultant that's writing the closure report for you keep telling you that you can't consider alternatives, and that is not true. I'm a Proctor Terrace parent, a school that people are casually referring to as not worth investing in. The bond money that's building the district a fancy new office building currently could be used to investigate fault lines at our schools. I want to close by saying that in a year when the school board knew it was going to close schools, this district has gone over budget by almost $9 million for private consultant contracts, payments for administrators, and the district still doesn't have set staffing ratios that account for school size and needs when they come to every parent in this room with their handout asking for school closures. Question the assumption that school closures are the only way.
Next up is Alexander Yoon, followed by Claudia Galindo.
To both the committee and the audience here, I want to pose a question. What measures are being taken to account for the effects school closures will have on the students? We talked about money, we talked about schools, but where are we, the students, in the picture? Even with all these warnings, even though no schools have closed yet, the mental toll, the fear of having schools closed is as devastating as not being able to go to school due to the COVID pandemic. So I just want to keep this short. Just please remember that even though there's money, there's schools, there's whatever is going on in the district, we exist, the students exist, and I hope you can consider us not only as numbers, but our voices as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Claudia Galindo.
Pertenezco al distrito desde el 2000. He pasado por Burbank, Cook, que ya no existe, Elsie Ellen, Santa Rosa Middle School y High School. Y ahora pertenezco a la comunidad de Pioneer. Y mi pregunta para el distrito, para todos los miembros del distrito, ¿en realidad están escuchando a la comunidad? Como madre de estudiantes de estas escuelas, hemos pasado por diferentes problemas y he sentido que nos han dado la nariz con la puerta. porque no han escuchado nuestras peticiones cuando se nos han pedido, cuando nos han preguntado en diferentes ocasiones y al final han terminado por tomar decisiones que no tienen nada que ver con nosotros como comunidad, como padres de familia. Decisiones que en sí no tienen nada que ver con nosotros. Nos están cortando en pedazos. Cada escuela es tan importante como una mano, como un ojo, como una pierna. Nuestros hijos no me...
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lara Lopez and I will be translating. Good night. I am a representative of the district. I've been since 2000. I have gone through Burbank, Cook, Elsie Allen, Santa Rosa, middle, and in high school. I am now part of the community of Pioneer. And my question to the district is, are you guys really taking in consideration the community? As a mother and a parent of a student who goes to our schools, we've gone through so many issues and problems, and I feel like sometimes you guys are asking for our opinions and considering what we're telling you, but then a door gets slammed in our face. It's very different, the opportunities that you guys are taking and the final decisions that you guys will make will have a big impact on our community. And you guys are tearing our community into pieces with all of the schools, and it's important that you guys help us, that you guys consider all of our students. You guys are taking us apart, and it's a big impact that we are receiving. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. That's all the comments we had for public comment tonight. We are going to transition now into the next portion of our agenda here, which will be into the analysis and prioritization.
I appreciate that. Community member and a teacher and administrator in this district. Thank you.
All right, they're making sure that the tech is up and running, so. They're working on that. All right, so if the public could keep it down, please, so that the committee is able to hear and talk to one another, we would really appreciate it. So what we are going to be doing is going to be a two-step, well, two-step process. So as Lisa noted earlier, what the board asked for was recommendations on 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school. So we're going to do that piece of it first and provide that recommendation. The board is going to be looking at and has all of the data that you have looked at. They might be considering other items. They might be asking staff for additional information. And so in order to make sure that we're providing the board with some options coming from this committee, we're going to be ranking the schools. So they were looking for a recommendation for 3 elementary schools, for example. So we're going to rank the top 6 elementary schools because it could be that they are taking other things into consideration, and we want to be able to provide them with that option. For the middle schools, we're just going to rank all of the middle schools. The high schools, we're going to rank the high schools so that we're providing them with the rank order for those schools. Once that recommendation and that part of this is complete in order to meet that mandate or that request from the board, then we can have the conversation about what other options there might be for the schools, whether it's TK8, whether it's 712s, whether it's something else that as you've been listening and reviewing data, et cetera, that you've considered and that has come into your minds, we can have that conversation and then that recommendation can be built and included as part of what's being provided to the board. All right? So I saw a question here and potentially one over there. Go for it, Janelle.
So my question goes back to something that we keep kind of coming back to. You're wanting to make a list of schools, but it's not clear whether you want to make a list of programs or you want to make a list of sites. Because we all know that the Doyle Street site is a problem, but I don't think anybody wants to close the French American Charter School as a program. So what name do we put on the list?
I think what we are putting together is it's a difficult thing, but I think you're looking at them more as not kind of splitting those two things up. French American is
I think they have to be split. Like I can't split I have to split those because there's no way that I would ever recommend the French American Charter School be closed as a program. It draws students from outside the district. That'd be crazy. But that site is obviously a problem.
Yes.
So I can't make a recommendation around that.
Well, I think what you have to think about is when we're looking at closing the school sites and we're looking at the potential savings that's incurred, that is the site and the program. If the recommendation is, so it's not about closing the school site because if you're closing, I'm not going to name another elementary school, the board is aware and the board has to grapple with, hey, if this program is remaining, it can't remain at the school site in the long term because of these issues, then they have to determine where they are going to move that charter school, where they are going to move that program. So what you're looking at is which one of the schools,
So we're
inclusive.
talking about the program. Because I think we've talked about this in past sessions where I asked that same question and you're saying, oh, we include it all together. But I can't include it together because if we include it together, then I say don't close that. But it actually does need to close. So it doesn't, we can't get around those two. Those two things are separate in some cases and they can't be put together. So
When we're
I'm having a problem with the assignment, is what I'm saying. And I have a problem with sticking so closely to what the board says when we've heard from the community, some really interesting ideas that would be really good to explore.
And I think we have the opportunity to explore those. I think the initial step is providing the board with the request that they made. And then that follow-up is to have a consideration of those others, potential creative ideas that others have come up with.
Yeah, what happens if we say no?
Sorry, folks in the audience, please keep it down. We're going to need to have a conversation up here.
Anyway, so it's fine. But what happens if we say no? We're not going to provide that 311 because we don't believe it.
You can say that as the committee. I would have you keep in mind that, again, you are making a recommendation. The board is going to make that decision if the board decides that it is, if the board decides that it is going to close X, Y, and Z schools, that is the information you're providing in order to help inform that. If you don't make that recommendation, then the board is going to look at all this data and it's going to make that decision in either case.
Or we could make a different recommendation.
And what we are proposing is that we do both things, that we meet what the board requested the committee to do, which was recommend those closures for those three, for the by grade span. And if there's other considerations that the committee would like to look at, then we include those as well. And so you have both of those bases covered.
Can I move to have the committee talk about that issue, about what recommendation, what type of recommendations to provide, to talk about the 311 or to look at some alternatives first? Is
So
that
you're saying
something that
look at
we
the
can- that
alternatives
we
bef-
could, is that something that we can discuss as a committee and decide to change? If we want?
It's not something that you can decide to change. That would be the board that would have to make a change to what they
I mean,
requested
decide
of the
like
committee.
in terms of like what we're actually going to do, like what we're going to talk about first.
So can I,
I mean, it could. Yeah.
Brianna, can I make a quick comment on that? So I think first of all, on our assignment, however we want to look at the assignment, we do have the rankings in front of us and we can look at how to score those through. The quicker we can go through the objective process of looking at the data sets and come up with some sort of prioritization, the quicker we can talk about alternative solutions of how do we mix and match those things through there. So we do have the ability, I think, to influence the board and influence the overall recommendation with both parts here, once we can get into that conversation. Yeah.
I've been kind of quiet this whole entire time, but I have to make this comment. It might not be productive, but when I'm talking about when the community has a lack of trust in the board, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You asked them to say something. You asked them to come out. You did this whole thing where you met at Piner and you met at Montgomery and you met all these schools. You've heard what they said, and still we're here like, no, we got to close the school. No, we got to close the high school. I don't like closing a high school. That's not my favorite thing. I don't like the idea. You know, I'm here, we got to do the assignment, but to the board, this is exactly what we're talking about. I was not a committee member before. I was a parent. And this is exactly what I was talking about when we're like, why are you asking for our opinion if you're not going to listen? I'm sorry, I cannot sit here as a committee member listening to all of our community who is threatening to leave and saying all these things. They have great ideas. Can we consider it? Okay, we'll do the assignment. We'll give you your 311. And then at the same time, can we talk about considering this? Because I'm sorry, maybe it's just me, but this is why the community is upset. And I understand being a committee member and being a community member. I am a mother. I am a PTA treasurer, or was. This is very frustrating, not having all the information, hearing all of this, and at the same time saying, got it, heard you. Well, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. How do you expect to build the trust with the community and the board? I'm sorry, that's it. Sorry.
And if I didn't say that clearly, my apologies. Not saying that you can't do both things or that we cannot do one because of the other. I think both of those sets of recommendations can be provided to the board as part of the presentation and for the board to consider all of those options. What I was just talking about was that we want to do both things so that we're meeting the original charge and that we're providing the additional recommendations to the board based on all of the committee, or excuse me, the community input, and based on from what I have heard many of the committee members note that they want to be able to explore those and look at those as well. So just saying not one or the other, let's do both of those things. Okay? So, yeah.
So clarifying question.
Oh, actually. Who? We were standing up because of the interpreter, the ALS interpreter. They're not here any longer, but it's still good for the community to see who's talking.
Well, my clarifying question has to do with the school closures. If we feel that there's programming at a school site that can be moved somewhere else? Because I see those as two separate things. So a school closure is a school closure. But when it comes to the programming, it was stated in this committee that we can move them somewhere else. And so I want to make sure that if there is some programming at a school site that might close, that the programming moves on and lives on.
So that would be a decision of the board as to, and staff as to what programming goes where. What I would say is if the committee recommends a school site and there's a program that you guys want to keep, then part of that recommendation could be, hey, board, we're talking about closing this school site, but we would recommend that this program continue elsewhere. But ultimately, as with any of this, it's the decision of the board what programs happen or continue or don't continue at the district. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So we have this evening, technically, we are already over our time. And so we want to acknowledge that. We have this evening and we have the meeting in January. And there would be two main things we want to get out of that. Again, two sets of recommendations, the straight closure and the recommendations for any other reconfigurations, creative ideas that the committee has. So we can do we've been doing the thumbs up, live with it, down. If we can agree that we're going to cover both of those things, I'm open to the committee's thoughts or process on which one you guys want to consider or talk about first. Because ultimately, this is your recommendation to the board. So considering some alternatives is one recommendation we want to get. And then the ranking of the schools for potential closure. Those are the two things that we want to get to between this meeting, and the next one. So to Janelle's point, is it the consensus of the committee? No, we really want to look at those alternatives first and then look at the closures? Or do we want to get to the recommendations about the closures and then look at the alternatives? Go ahead. One here and then.
To be just really frank, I think it's, for me, very important to know, like, what would happen to the program, because I wouldn't, if we did it where we do the recommendation first, then the alternatives, then I probably would not recommend the French charter school, the elementary school or the campus to be shut down. The only way I would do that is knowing that the program has a new home, because we know that's a magnet program for the district. So that's why I do think starting with the alternatives first might actually help us decide which school campuses, because we could create the alternative plan first and then go with the 311 rule. That's just thinking about it more and actually thinking about shutting down some of the schools. I do think specifically the French charter school, knowing that campus has to shut down because of the fault line, I wouldn't shut it down if it wasn't guaranteed to move to another campus.
The only thing I would add to that is when you're looking at the alternatives while thinking about how that impacts the closure is one thing, we have to also keep in mind that if the board were not to go with any of the alternatives, then those closures would be standing alone. So just something to keep in mind as you're puzzling both of those things. And then there was.
I was just gonna say that is there any extra information that this group would need and there's a big gap between now and the 27th. And it sounds like there's still a lot of information that people are still there's unanswered questions. I think that's the frustration. There's so many unanswered questions, and then you have to make a decision. And you feel like, why would you make a decision if you have not all the stuff in front of you? So I don't know if there's anything that more information that this group would want to prepare us to make better decisions on the 27th, as far as what our options are. I don't know what you can get us that's more, maybe disaggregated, attendance data, like how many 95407s are traveling across town, or how many 9403s are going over to another place. and maybe going back to the board and asking for a little bit more guidance where we have more flexibility in how we present. I don't know. I think it's hard to, I know that this almost has its rankings already done. I mean, the reality is they're kind of already done. I mean, I don't know. It's not that it's like we're here for, so much is already laid out. I just think that we need to investigate the other creativity about what to do with these situations like French Charter. And what's the difference between a site that has an earthquake fault and a school that happens to be residing on that fault?
I think you have to, so two things. One, with regards to the criteria and the ranking or that information. And we've tried to make it clear from when we started this, but to reiterate, that information is there. It's in some respects to help you how to kind of parse and think about the data, but it's really for you to use as a reference. So if you are considering X school for closure and you see that it's ranked with, or it has X score, then that is pointing you to, okay, it was high in certain areas. What were those areas? And go back and look at the data. So it's not intended to, okay, that was 35, 36, 34. So that's the order and that's what we're doing. It really is, okay, it's 35, 36, 34. What went into that? Let me go back and look at that data. And then as we were talking about before, for some of you, if it ranked high on one of them, that might be to you, yeah, that's a lower priority. I really do think that this should be weighed more. And so it's not a black and white, let me look at that number and that's where it's going for. So just wanted to put that out there. Yeah. And then the other piece of it with regards to data, I know it's hard. It's difficult in anything in life to feel, especially something as important and as monumental and as big of an impact as this is going to have, to feel like you have every piece of information you need. It's always in some respects going to be based on, the data that's available and what you have at that moment. And it doesn't make it necessarily any easier to do that. But just something to keep in mind. And with regards to the students and where they're moving, that inter-district transfer and showing where the schools are from, I think that's where you see some of that, to keep that. And so I don't know what other data, without starting to break things down to, and then it's almost like, what's that? There's a term about like data paralysis. Then you start to look at some of those things. So it's a difficult one.
I think we should look at alternatives first, and for a couple of reasons. First is, as a member of the Fiscal Stabilization Committee, we recommended to the board an amount of money with an attached suggested possible scenario, but not close these schools. And then, and I'm shocked that I'm going to say this, but I wish I could go back and watch the board meeting again. Because I'm questioning my own memory of that board meeting. Because we presented a dollar amount to the board. I do not remember them saying 3 elementaries, 1 middle, 1 high school. I don't remember it happening. And I'm questioning whether I'm losing my mind because I sat through that board meeting. Yeah.
So it was in the last 5 minutes of the meeting that when the example came up, there was we need to actually go ahead and approve the direction so that the committee has a place to work from, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what they move forward with. And so that's where they were looking for more than just a 311. They do want more than just that 311.
So our assignment is not, this is it, and that's nothing else. You can't
Right,
do anything else.
it's 311 with rankings, and they would love options and alternatives.
All right. It hurts my soul to say, look at it, alternatives, as a middle school teacher for the past 25 years who has worked at 3 of the middle schools in this city. I see so many problems with a TK-8 and a 712 model, but I think we should look at them.
I think for myself, hearing tonight the community,
and what the members are saying. I think in order for the committee to move forward with any recommendations, we need to see what the data would show us if we did the TK8 model or the 712, because that information may lead to natural recommendations to the board. And so for me, I don't want to do a 311 recommendation tonight. I feel that we need to move forward at the January 27th. We also did schedule an alternate February 3rd in case we need it, and it sounds as though we do.
I heard some people mention there's trenching at Proctor Terrace, but I didn't see any mention of it in the report. I would love to hear about that.
Yes, in 2018, there was approximately 120-foot trench that was dug. Because at that time, just the bare tip of that parcel was in the zone. And so that was done, and it only covers the area where the portable was installed with the restrooms. So to do additional there, and no, there was not there were no traces found of the fault in that 120-foot stretch.
Yeah, of course, right. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to put portable.
Exactly, but the rest of to do the modernization
They'd
or
still
any of
need
the
to do some more
we'd have to do
trenching
the rest of the campus.
But it is hopeful that there was none found there.
Ugh. Okay. Did they do something for Brook Hill, Hidden Valley? Did they do any of those fall trenching for them?
No, so the Alquist Priolo zone, the map was expanded this year. And so no, those haven't been done yet.
Okay. Are they going to be?
That will depend on the outcome of the committee and the board's decision. So if those sites remain open, then yes, the trenching would be done to determine what work would be needed.
So I guess I'm a little confused now because there's a lot of changes happening right now. Is there any way we could have a meeting before January 27th? I know there's 21 people plus staff, but it's just, there's a lot of changes. You've presented a lot of data, which given the parameters, it makes sense to for this committee to make a recommendation. But also there's alternatives that need to be kind of brainstormed. And if we have the opportunity to do that before making a recommendation, also side note, we could make a recommendation. We will make a recommendation, and then they could blow it up. I mean, I've been part of that process before. Rest in peace, Al Molino. And it's not going to be easy. And I also don't think understanding kind of like public comment and things, I want to caution on us changing our agenda and what the point of tonight's meeting actually was, because we're just supposed to, we don't actually know how we take the public comment, and it sounds like we're taking their feedback and then kind of changing the agenda, which we have already adopted or approved earlier in the meeting. So just want to caution, because public comment's going to happen at the next 2 meetings, and we can't change what our agenda actually is because of what the community is saying, because we're governed by the Brown Act. So, and if we decide not to make a recommendation, the board still has to cut $20 million, right?
All right, so with regards to the agenda, the agenda item is analysis and prioritization. And so in that respect, the committee's work and what it's doing and looking at how it's analyzing the school sites, et cetera, I don't think that part is a change. I think it's more of ensuring that the committee is providing the information that the board has requested which is they wanted the ranking of the schools, and then we're very interested in also hearing about what potential alternatives were. So I think as long as we're still doing those two things, that we're meeting the spirit of that. So I am going to go back to, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Can we do our alternative thoughts first and create a list? And then after that, do the ranking? Can we do it beforehand?
Yeah, and that's what I was asking is that there's two basically big picture recommendations we want to potentially walk out of here with. That's the closures ranking. And then if there's any alternatives that the committee wants to make a recommendation to. And I am at this point open to which one the preference is to do first. It sounds like, and we'll do our thumbs up, thumbs down. It sounds like there's a good number of you that would like to consider some alternatives before the actual ranking. So if I can get a thumbs up of, what, a question before that? Okay. Get a thumbs up of do considerations or recommendations on that alternatives first, and then we discuss ranking of the schools for closure. Or you don't want to do it that way, then thumbs down. All right. Recommendations first. Or not recommendations, alternatives. Hold on. You next.
I just wanted to clarify that if we did consider a K-8 model, or yeah, I guess it would just be K-8 model, the site at which that took place would have to be within both the elementary and high school district lines. Okay.
Are we doing this in this small group circle first and then bringing it back to the greater group, or is it open
Yeah,
group?
so what we want to do is, well, one thing we need to maybe, I'm thinking two different things. See, we threw a curveball, so I got to think about this for a second. I think it would be good is if as a larger group, we maybe had a couple of the alternatives that the individual groups can then think about and talk about, because otherwise each one of you could be coming up with 5 different things. And then it would make things more complicated. So maybe we could throw up what some of the alternatives, and maybe it turns out that everybody's thinking the same one, and that's easy. But if there were different people that had, well, what about this? What about that? Let's figure out what that list is, and then we can see what the universe is, and we can go from there. How does that sound?
That sounds great. I'm definitely interested in starting this. I'm also interested in perhaps putting an end time to this meeting, because it's, 8:41.
Yeah.
I've been at many a board meeting that goes till midnight.
Don't want to do that.
But we don't want to do that. So could we decide how long we will do this and then agree that we will stop at some point?
So what if we do this? Let's throw up what the alternatives are. Because if we come up with 2, then that's at least what we can move with. And if we come up with 20, then we know that's going to take a little bit more time and we're going to have to pull back on that. Okay? So who wants to raise their hand the first? 1, 2, 3, I'll go this way and then come around. All right.
All right, was that me too?
Go
Yeah.
for it.
Just summarize a lot of the alternatives we already heard here, just to get them onto the list. And maybe I'll start by saying, I think an alternative we should consider is that a one size fits all isn't required. Meaning that we could have 7 through 12, we could have K through 8, we could have traditional 6 to 8 or 7 to 8. So there could be a mix and match. So something I just want the committee to be considering when we're looking at alternatives is mixing and matching. So maybe the list is kind of a menu of items. So 7 to 12 on certain campuses, K through or TK through 8 on certain campuses, 6 to 8 on certain campuses, 7 to 8 on certain campuses, as it is currently TK through 6 on certain. So kind of mixing all of those in there so that it's not necessarily across the board, we're closing all middle schools and going all through K through 12, or across the board, we're doing all K through 8. I think the boundaries are going to get us, it's going to get complicated when we try and do that. And so I would put out there as the alternative for consideration that we look at mixing and matching based on geography, based on needs, student situations, boundaries, all of those things.
Would then the recommendation to the board be that they consider a mix and match, or are you proposing that the committee actually go through and figure out which one's doing which?
I think it would be very useful for, as part of the eventual delivery to the board, that we have some consideration of which would be which. So when we're looking at alternatives, not just saying, oh, general 7 through 12 would be useful, but to specifically say, oh, putting 7 through 12 on the Pioneer campus specifically, and Santa Rosa High campus specifically, because we've moved folks from Comstock 7-8 over into that campus, that type of analysis as recommendations.
You were next.
I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, does it have to be K-8? Can it be TK to 3, 4 to 8? I think that that is also a different alternative way of looking at education, and we do have local districts that do it that way and have done it that way for many years. And second, just on the lens of alternative, I think that we could do a far better job as a district providing alternative educational opportunities on our high school sites. And I say this with all the love in my heart from every high school that is open right now, and I don't mean to say bad things and make people feel bad. I really don't. But Ridgeway's purpose is to create alternative opportunities for students. We could take our students back at every high school and create those opportunities ourselves and save money on the closing of that site as a high school site that could be closed, saving the 5 traditional high schools. So I would like to look at alternative programming on sites because that program can be emulated. We have a partial program like that at Pioneer now with Grace, and every other high school could do it very easily. And we have an alternative coordinator who could do a fabulous job of creating that. And it's called job security for many of us. So to be honest, I would like to look at that.
Thank you. My end time because of chronic pain is 9 p.m. Again, I'm in a lot of pain right now. So my recommendation would be, so on reservations, Indian reservations, their school models are K-8, and then they have a high school. They have they don't have more than one. So that works for the Indians. So I don't see how it wouldn't work for non-Indian children. Again, back to being a 3rd generation Indian boarding school native, where my grandmother was taken and she was put in a school. We have the opportunity to make schools within the Santa Rosa City School District, big picture schools, which are public schools. And I'm with these kids a lot and they like going to school. And what I'm hearing with the Santa Rosa is we're having declined enrollment and kids are not coming. But my big picture kids, they love going to school. They're not coming there to, stab anybody or harm any of the students or staff. So I want us to look into big picture schools. Thank you.
My recommendations are already on the board, but one thing that did come up was if we are starting to merge schools or boundaries, whatever you want to say, I think looking at the gang territory is a really crucial piece, because if all of a sudden we start mixing things, it could get really bad.
So if we could, if we're going to look at closing all middle schools, if it could be done as a transition, first year, 8th graders out, second year, 7th graders out. So there is a slower movement, and then they're going into their designated high schools. And then my second one, and I know this is unpopular, if we do have to close a high school, if we could also do the same thing, transitioning the classes out and not bringing new ones in. That way, those that are in the school can finish their high school with their college or their friends.
And again, any potential for transition, that's something that the board would have to take into consideration. I would think that as the committee, we could write that in as a recommendation. But they are also looking at some fiscal realities, and so they'll have to take that into consideration as well. So.
Thank you.
So is that the universe? Oh,
It's sort of on there, but I think I want to make sure it's clear, one of the options should be keeping all 5 big high schools, all 5 of the high schools. And the other thing I would want to put on there is looking at moving programs that are not within the district boundary into the district boundary, especially if there's no reciprocity with that district.
and that's something I think in that respect, that is something that the board would have to consider when those charter renewals are coming up.
No, I mean like saying, moving that, saying that that program would be relocated. So it's not renewing the charter, the program is still there. So it's maybe like CCLA is on in the right district.
Right.
Saying, hey, why don't you move to Santa Rosa Middle School? I don't know. I mean, I'm just making that up. Don't anybody start any rumors, but like just kind of.
That's how they get started.
I just started that, sorry. But I mean, something like that, where if Santa Rosa City Schools doesn't have reciprocity, then there's no leverage to keep that site.
Yeah.
So it may be a priority to try to move that program.
And
that, I think that should be that could be part of the discussion of the solutions.
And I would think that that is, again, that's a line item recommendation that the committee can make to the board, but it's not a, do you close one? It wouldn't look into the whole closure or not closure. So the board, if you're again, as you said.
Isn't it all recommendations?
Say that again?
Isn't it all of what we're doing recommendations? I mean, isn't everything we're doing recommendations?
Yes. I guess
Yeah,
as we were talking about.
There's recommendations.
As we were talking about, I keep saying that as alternatives, as we're looking at alternatives.
Right. That's one of the alternatives, to think about ways to shuffle things around and close this site or that site, or not, what could be done with those. And the same thing with by 7 through 12 and TK through 8, it's shuffling people around.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
I was just going to say for Ridgeway, I think we just said, did you say dissolve and then just make separate programs on all the high schools? The other option was maybe just close the Ridgeway site, and it's kind of already on Santa Rosa High School's campus anyway. They got space, move it to Santa Rosa. It's already got the space. That said $1.9 million savings. And the other thing is, just a food for thought, is that credentialing challenges, master scheduling challenges, putting the 7 through 12 all on one campus. As an athletic coach, it's a nightmare just to schedule those gyms for the girls and boys basketball and sharing. And so I played sports in middle school, or I was at a junior high school. I know that at an elementary school, I think only 2 of our elementary schools actually have cafeteria gyms that are sort of the right size. The rest of them are all really tiny. Outside of maybe Bielas and Hidden Valleys, everybody else has like a really, you can't do anything in there. So for us to bring on middle school kids, like it's hard for us to offer them the sporting opportunities unless we have access to the old sites to run a track, to use their gym and do the like. The other thing I just want to toss out there is I don't know the answer to this, and I don't think we will ever know the answer to this, but if if parents were pulling their kids out of our schools that they felt were unsafe, and those were like juniors and seniors, the last thing you're going to do is stick your 12 and 13-year-old on the site that you think that your 17-year-old scared to go to. So I hope we don't lose potential students that feeling like they're all of a sudden thrust. And again, if we're doing the K through 8, or sorry, we're having 7th graders coming back onto our elementary campuses, this whole eastern corridor is such a challenge because we can't force Bennett Valley, Rankin Valley, Mark West to take our 7th and 8th graders unless we're going to farm them somewhere different.
I just want to speak to the idea of pulling kids down to elementary and from 7 and 8 to from middle school down to elementary. There are things that middle school students outgrow in an elementary facility. And so I just want to really be cognizant of the 2 campuses we have, 3 campuses, I guess, if we include Arch Charter, that can house elementary, but have the facility of a middle school to support science, sports, arts, all the things that a middle schooler might need. So in my mind, that in the best interest for the students is not to kind of hold back older grades and bring them back down to elementary, but if we are entertaining a 7 through 8, that it'd be looking at pushing them up, pushing younger ones up.
Middle schools into K-8s? No, that's what I was like.
Yeah, so instead of turning an elementary school into a TK through 8, prioritizing turning a middle school into a TK through 8. So that the facilities that middle schoolers grow into and need as that they transition to high school are available to them. We have these beautiful schools in our portfolio and facilities, and it'd be a shame to kind of toss them out and then try to rebuild those facilities on an elementary school campus. That doesn't make fiscal sense to me.
All right. So I think at this point, given the various options, is there, with regards to the moving to a K through 8 or a 7 through 12, or those kinds of reconfigurations of school sites, is there, I'm almost afraid to ask this question. Is there what additional information as far as, capacity or enrollment or that type of thing do you need in order to consider those reconfigurations of grades? And remember, you have data on enrollment for all the school sites,
Yeah.
you know where they're feeding into, you know where the transfers are going in and out.
I don't think we have any real concept of how much money would be saved, if any, right? So and I'm not starting rumors, but let's pretend that Comstock becomes a TK-8 school. And that means we're closing Biella or Lehman or, both of them and saying, this is your school now. We don't know how much that would actually save. And we don't know, contrary to all of the comments here, we have no idea how many of those parents would actually agree that that's what they want. Because it sounds like what they want is for their elementary students to stay where they are and just add some 7th and 8th graders. But there's no, I'm going to follow what Ross said. As a middle school teacher, there's no facilities. There would have to be no sports programs for these TK-8 schools because there's no gymnasiums. There's, how do you have to get different teachers with different credentials with a master schedule, a different schedule, right? CCLA can't even schedule their staff meetings because their middle school and elementary school don't end at the same time every day.
And so they're really working on kind of two schools, right? I think Charter for the Arts does it a little bit better, but they're an elementary school. They've always been considered an elementary school. And the way that CCLA was created at the campus, absorbing the Cook students, the middle school model was kept, which really creates a situation of, two schools kind of functioning. I mean, even scheduling lunch is impossible because the middle school students at CCLA don't eat lunch until 12:45 or something crazy like that, right? Just because the cafeteria can't keep up with the number of lunches that are needed to be served. So all of these things just make me really nervous about this idea of just like, a TK8 school, because we don't know if the families will come. And that's the whole point. If we lose 30% of our families through attrition because they don't like the way our schools are aligned anymore, we're not saving any money. We're going to be losing it and be right back here a year from now with a $11 million deficit because we've lost so many families who look at the situation and say, I don't want to send my kid to a TK8 school at Comstock. Right. And that's so. Thank you for listening to me rant, but I think we don't know how much money we would save.
Yeah, I mean, and we provided you with the information for the individual schools. And so there's some, math and deduction that you could potentially do if you said, okay, we're combining these. But ultimately, you're right. And that's part of this, providing the board with a recommendation of this is something that the committee believes that the board should consider. And then it really is the board and staff who have all of that breakdown and data that are going to have to figure out what all of those scenarios look like for the board. That's really where that decision and that type of analysis needs to happen. Because there's no way that, as you said, that you could think of all of those various implications, that some of the things that were mentioned with regards to, gangs or where you were going to lose students or all of these things, we don't have the expertise and that capacity to figure out to that nth degree. That really is, the board is providing staff direction. Staff is going to have to look at all of those types of details and information and configuration and come back to the board and say, look, if you did this, that's what it looks like. And so that's really why, as for the committee, those alternative recommendations really should be more along the lines of, hey, we really do think that the board should consider, and I'm saying this out loud because this is what we heard from a lot of people, a 7 through 12 model. And if the board wants to do that, then they are going to direct staff. All right, what does that look like and what happens? If it's a TK through 8 model, okay, what does that look like and what's going to happen? And so what you are taking is based on the information that you have and the best information that you have with you is, look, here's the school closures that you asked for if none of these other things could happen, because the board could look at all of that you just mentioned and went, that'll work or it not work. Here's those closures, and here's some other things that we think, based on community input, based on the information that we've looked at, that we think could be helpful for our district board. Please consider these others. And then the board has to go through that work with staff in order to vet and work all of that out. For the committee to get to that level of detail, I think we'll be here for another 6 meetings trying to figure all of that out. We're going to get to this level of this information that really we don't have, and you guys don't have that expertise, that it's really left to the program staff, the academic staff, the staff of the district to figure out that level of detail for the board to consider. And I know we're at officially your.
Was Herman's question answered about having another meeting before the 27th meeting?
We are having the 27th. I don't believe, I know we came with the 27th because there weren't opportunities before the 27th, which is how we landed on that date. We can certainly go back and look, but I know when we set the schedule, we did it based on looking at availability on the district side and also our side, and that's how we arrived at that.
Okay, and then, so are we having the extra meeting? It would be like the last one in parentheses.
February 3rd.
So the concern with that would be the time frame, the timeline to have that report and recommendation to the board in time for public comment and public input, the public hearing piece of it. So the board on Wednesday will be setting the schedule for next year. And we had looked at the 5th to give plenty of turnaround time between the everything being presented then and then the 19th for action. So the superintendent could recommend to the board that we move that proposed date from the 5th to the 12th. The issue with that then though is that we don't have very much time in between to get them that information, to meet with the executive committee or whoever, or to get that prepared or whatever that looks like for them to make that final recommendation. So it would be very tight pushing it to the 3rd if we can get it done on the 27th. Yeah, and that just has to do with the legal posting requirements, the 72-hour notice.
Given that it took us until 7 tonight to even get to public comment, and here we are at 9:03 and haven't actually done any committee work.
Well,
Could we start the meeting on the 27th earlier? So that it's not 9 PM and everyone on this committee is wondering how awake they're going to be at work tomorrow.
Yeah. I will note that there was a presentation this evening because we wanted to answer all the parking lot questions. But the next meeting would be starting just straight from the beginning, the committee doing its work. So hopefully that will help with that because we wouldn't have an hour and a half of presentations and questions about that presentation. We would be starting from the very beginning. Well, yes, public comment is built in there regardless. But as far as that hour and a half that we spent going through the presentation and talking about that and answering those questions, that would not be part there. So we would be starting at 5:30, for example, with, all right, these are the, here's the charge, here's what we're doing. Let's start having those conversations in the groups. So that should help. But I would leave, I don't know how any other committee members feel about starting earlier than 5:30. I would imagine people are coming from work, et cetera, but is there a general, I'm seeing one, here, I saw somebody else over here look like. Got it. So. Got it. So hopefully since we don't have that presentation at the beginning, that will get us up to a running start much more quickly.
I believe when I saw on the agenda that when we moved it to 1 minute for the public speaking, that if I read it correctly, there's a possibility of limiting or putting a cap on how many public speaking, because 60 was excessive. And I know it's very important for everybody, but we can't do our job with that as well.
Yes, that is part of, that is what's on the agenda, that it can be limited or to 20 minutes. And so if that's something that the committee wants to hold firm to, and we're saying it here out loud in front of the public, and also knowing that the public, again, the committee is doing this to make recommendations to the board. The board is making the ultimate decision, and the committee, the public will have opportunity to also make public comment at the board meetings. And so we can, if that's the committee's consensus, make sure that for the next meeting that the public comments just stay at that 20-minute as noted on the agenda, if that's a consensus of all of the committee members. If I can get a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Sorry, just to clarify, is this consensus to limit it to 20 minutes right off the bat?
Correct.
As an alternative proposal, could I propose that the public comment would happen after the committee's discussion points? So the public comment may start later into the evening, but we don't necessarily limit it to 20 minutes. We limit it to 1 minute per person, or is that not an option?
There's a Brown Act issue that the public has to have the opportunity to comment prior to
As much as I love our check-ins at the beginning of the meeting, I enjoy them very much. I was wondering if we could skip that part and just say here.
And I just have a clarifying question. So did I hear that when we start up with our meeting the next time, will we have public comment? Or we're gonna dive right into making our recommendations?
We would be diving into having the conversations and looking at what those, the options, et cetera,
The
are.
ranking?
And then, yeah, the ranking, and then we probably then put in the public comment and then have you guys then have an item where actually then, you know, everybody's on board, yay, nay, with what the recommendations are moving forward.
How did we end up at Montgomery High School? Number one. Number two is, can we have another location for the next meeting since we just broke neutrality and ended up at random high school?
So because we can't accommodate all of everybody here at the district office location, we were looking at multiple sites as far as space, and it has to occur within boundaries of both districts. And so it can only be at a site that is within the elementary and secondary boundaries. And then it was space. So the two options available were for the committee to be up on the stage in the auditorium at Santa Rosa High or to be in here.
It's, you're not. Oh, because you two are competing for that.
He estado escuchando todos los comentarios, sugerencias en esta noche. Y uno de los datos importantes que me hubiera gustado que se hubiera incluido en esta información, hablamos de seguridad, ¿correcto? Y es lo que nos preocupa mucho de nosotros como padres, la seguridad en las escuelas. ¿Qué hay de las pandillas? ¿Por qué no hubo mucha información? Me hubiera gustado que hubiera información de cada escuela, qué pandillas predominan en cada escuela. O sea, no estamos preocupando solamente por distribuirlos, pero no pensamos en que unos estudiantes que son de una pandilla van a ir a otra escuela donde son unas pandillas contrarias, ¿verdad?
So I've been hearing all the comments that's been said tonight, but one comment or information I would have liked to hear about was about like us parents and the concerns we have about gang violence in school and moving schools, one school to another, and how the gang related would be moving from one school to another. How would that affect our students? And me as a parent, that's kind of the concern that I have, but I didn't hear anything about it in this meeting.
And I know for me, that's one of the reasons why I really do think that the recommendation about alternatives should be focused about the type of structure and not getting down to, let's move this school to that and this school to that and this school to this, because there is other information that district staff and the board have to really look at and dive into, and that's one of them. When they're deciding if they're going to move forward with that type of reconfiguration, what school does that pathway versus this committee coming down and saying, we want this school to move to this one, to this, and those pathways, and really more have your recommendation think about, okay, we think that 7 through 12 or TK through 8 or TK through 3 or whatever, that is something that the board should consider. And then they can take that general direction and have staff really dig into what makes the most sense based on the demographics and everything else that's happening within the district.
Otro de los puntos importantes también creo yo que no se les ha estado, tal vez en parte, la información a los padres o comunidad, un poco más información porque muchos están confundidos lo que son los bonos escolares al presupuesto también que tiene el distrito, ¿verdad? Entonces sería bueno proveer esta información Creo que va a haber una serie de reuniones empezando enero y creo yo que sería buena información para los papás y la comunidad.
So another important information that can be helpful for the parents is maybe about the school budget. I know there's going to be more meetings in the future in January about it. Maybe I know a lot of us are confused, and it would be helpful if you guys show or give us more information about that.
Eso es todo por el momento y vamos a seguir en esas reuniones, ¿verdad?
And for now, we will continue with these meetings, correct?
So right now, we have this one that we will end shortly. And then we have the meeting on the 27th. And then Lisa can follow up with the superintendent or others with regards to whether or not that alternative one that we have set up is a possibility or whether we have to reach our conclusion or our recommendations at the next meeting on the 27th.
Is it possible for the public to provide written comments? That might reduce the amount of talking time.
So they are attached, the written comments that were received are attached under information or under correspondence at the end of the agenda today. And so, yes, I would continue to attach those.
But I think, Janelle, are you asking, you're saying for them to do that instead of?
That they have an option for doing that.
Yes, they do have
And
the
making that
option.
clear that they have the option of doing that if they, you're all here too.
Yeah.
But people are, I feel like we shouldn't limit the time that the public has to speak. I mean,
So just
1 minute for every person, but not like limit them. I know it was a long time. I was also getting tired, but
Just to address the written option, email Lisa is how that works. So if you send an email to Lisa, it will get to the committee. It's attached to our agenda. We have all of the sort of pre-read information from any information that gets sent out. So if anyone wants to send written comment ahead of time, that's the best way to do it, to get to us. Just public comment for the site consolidation or anything like that will work as subject line.
I would just like to take a minute to address the question about gang violence in schools. And I think it's very important that we are very careful about what we say about certain demographics of students in our schools. Because if a school has a gang problem, it's not the gang's problem, it's the school's problem. And I think we have highly successful schools in this district that are doing amazing work with all students, no matter who they affiliate with. And so I would be very careful of how we start having those conversations. I just want to say that out loud. Thank
No,
you.
Yes, I agree. And that's why, again, I think that's something for board and staff. That's their conversations and considerations, and why I think the committee should stay away from trying to provide recommendations with regards to move this school, that school, whichever school. I think it really should be the broader. We do think that a 7 through 12 model is the way that the committee would recommend the board go, or something to that effect, and not get into those levels of specifics.
Based on public comment, I also think the scenario of, what is it, the school district office? Can that be shopped around a different campus as well as that as an alternative? I think that's what somebody said during public comment, and I think that, I don't know what the costs are of the school district's office, but
I think those are that is a completely different separate piece, where the district office, that's, based on what may or may not be closed, and the board can decide how that happens. The funding for that is completely separate and apart, as far as the facilities are concerned, and is not an ongoing cost, which is what this is trying to address in the facilities books, or excuse me, the district's books. And so I would say it's out of the committee's purview to determine what's happening with the district office or not. The purview from the board really is the school sites. And if the board then decides it's putting the district office at A, B, or C, it's doing that keeping all of this in mind. Okay. All right, so I think we have done enough damage for one evening. So we will synthesize. Yeah. We will synthesize what we were talking about earlier. We'll set up their next meeting to have a conversation about alternatives and to have the conversation about the rankings of the schools. We will find out and let you know in advance whether or not we can have another meeting or whether we have to get it all done at that time. And then we will go from there. All right. That said, there are at the very end of the agenda is public comments on items not on the agenda. We have 2 public comments, and so let's get those read, and then we can adjourn the meeting. All
So
right.
2 public comments for non-agenda items that are going to call up here at the end here. The first one is Ethan Cosgrove, and the second one is Dirk Shermer.
Thank you. All right, Ethan Cosgrove, did I just say resident? No. All right. I just love the innovative solution that the community came up with, which was making schools TK through 8 rather. Oh, there's no clock. Nice. Oh, here you go. All right, thank you. And I think you've heard it. You've heard a lot from the community, like the level of distrust, right? You had a district that already had a big perception problem, which is why we're here right now. We'd have always had to close a school or 2. The idea that we have to close 5 at a time is not just state trends. It is a reflection of the climate of the school districts in this city. When this really hits the fan, when schools start to close, that trust is going to go down even more. And I think it might be time for Santa Rosa City Schools to consider the fact that they've already lost the war over students in this city, and that maybe they should get out of the elementary school game entirely and cede those areas to the districts around.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
That's the minute. Is Dirk Shermer? Is Dirk still here? Okay, maybe not. All right, in that case, next steps, or did we covered? Okay, are we calling it? All right, we are calling the meeting for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.